Welcome to Norse Code, the number one podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, the Vikings won our Super Bowl. How fantastic is that?
Yeah, I'm told it's the Vikings Super Bowl, mostly from Packers fans. It's odd that they get dominion over what counts, but they seem pretty confident in it, so it must be true.
Yeah, they've been very confident, including a coach on the sidelines yelling to Paul Allen that don't give your team any credit for this win. So
wait, did that happen?
That happened. Yeah.
Wait, is that a Paul Allen story, or did we catch like a mic of that?
Well, it's technically is both, because it was a Paul Allen story that happened in front of Ben Lieber and the other guy. That was on the broadcast. If you go over to the Minnesota Vikings subreddit real quick, I'll talk about it here for just a second. What ended up happening was immediately after the game, coaches are on the field or whatever. Paul Allen's on the field and is setting up for the shot that he's going to do with Ben Lieber and the other guy whose name I can never remember. And it was a Packers assistant coach that went over to Paul Allen and said specifically, don't give your team any credit for this one.
Wow. Okay, so I see. This is Gabe Henderson from VEN. This is the original airing of Between the Lines. Is that the one you're looking at?
Yeah, that was
Paul Allen goes off on Eric Stokes and a disrespectful Packers coach.
Yep. So it was an incredibly interesting little moment, and Paul Allen eventually just stops pulling punches and just starts saying the thing that he actually wants to be saying by the end of it. But yeah, it was real ridiculous, and this is a salty time for Packers fans. I'm
like surprised because like the last time that the Packers lost, which was last year, because they tend to split the series more often than not, right? I mean, like with the Packers swept in like 2019, but it has largely been even, right?
Yeah, for whatever reason, Kirk Cousins I think is like 3-3 and like 1.
Yeah, he's 3-3, which is hilarious. So Kirk Cousins has pulled to 500 as a starting quarterback in his career, and also 500 against the Packers, which I mean, obviously, hilariously includes the tie. So the Vikings, beat the Packers again, and by again, I just mean they split the series a lot, and it feels like the reaction from Packers fans, and maybe I'll feel this next year and I'll forget it this year. Maybe it was like this last time, was a little bit salty, right? I was going to say like vitriolic, but that's not really. I think salty is maybe the best way to put it. I don't know. Like every year I get fewer and fewer Packers fans tweeting at me that think that like I'm personally, like I play for the team. Like I get fewer and fewer of them that are like, you lost. And so I get a bit more removed from it every year. And so this year was a bit of a surprise when I saw a bunch of Packers fans in my mentions telling me that like, this win isn't real. And it's like, well, okay, but I mean, like last time it was real, I guess. I mean, you seem to acknowledge that. So very weird. But yeah, a lot of that.
It's the Vikings won their Super Bowl, and in typical Vikings fashion, it means we have to defend the Super Bowl now. Like we have to, like there has to be more to it. Like it's not just as simple as we won on Sunday and now we get to just enjoy the offseason. Oh no. I actually would like to suggest that there be a linear championship lineage now. So like the next team who beats the Vikings, they're like ends up winning this, like ends up like taking the title.
It's their Super Bowl. Yeah,
it's sure. Their Super Bowl. They take the title. So say if the 49ers win, the 49ers take that traveling trophy home, and then the next team they play, if it's Seahawks or whatever, and then it just continues back until the Vikings can potentially win back the trophy. So I'd be curious about the linear championship that's going to happen in the NFL now that the Vikings won the Super Bowl in Week 11.
That's the only team to have done that.
And again, in typical Vikings fashion, it's not really over when you think it's over. It does end up having to be played out to the final down. Well, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys are all doing well. This is going to be a double episode. This is going to be an episode that we both review the victory over the Packers, and we preview the 49ers game as well. So this is gonna be the I think in the pre-show I'd refer to this as the Thanksgiving leftovers episode, where you're gonna you're probably gonna end up picking at this for about a week. Like this one's gonna end up being a long one. So sit back, relax, enjoy. We've got plenty of great stuff here, including a great mailbag. But before we start, just want to thank everyone for listening to Norse Code. If you would like to help keep the show ad-free, if you'd like to get bonus material from us, you can go to patreon.com/Norse Code, like these fine people have. Purple Psycho 68. I like a good username instead of a real name. I like a good username for this.
That's it. And that one is like a throwback, right? That reminds me of like Twitter in 2014 or something like that. That's like a throwback.
Exactly.
Sure.
Purple Psycho 68. Thank you so much for your support. Also,
wait, hold on. You couldn't be like one more psycho?
No, that would be too nice. You probably wouldn't be psycho at that point.
That's fair, yeah.
Too nice. Thomas Helly, longtime contributor to the mailbag, said, I listened to several Vikings podcasts, but you guys truly are the best. Thank you for blending expert critical analysis with humor, loyalty, and angst. Thank you, Thomas. And also we have Jeremy Allen, who says, mocking the Packer ownership shares was the tipping point for me to finally throw in my tree fitty per month. Glorious. Also, I believe the quote-unquote owners have to pay an additional $30 of servicing and handling to actually get the piece of paper certifying their ownership. Skull from Urbandale, Iowa, and part-time Dent, Minnesota.
So actually, that is slightly untrue because it's $35. So yeah, you have to pay on top of that. There's actually a piece in the Action Network. I have a feud with Darren Rovell. I think he blocked me on Twitter because he shared an anecdote as if he was the one conducting the interview and he wasn't.
Did you know, by the way, this is the 2-year anniversary of his JFK post?
Yes. Oh my gosh. And I think we discussed it last time, but like how he found a high def version of the Zapruder film is we have like a Patreon bit, right? I don't know.
There was we did a thing on Patreon a little bit ago. It was earlier this summer where we discussed how he accomplished that and how he was farming out ideas to his social media
he had like a
team.
bunch of interns. Yeah, for sure. That ruled. Yeah, that I think was one of our funnier bits, and I think the world of our bits. So I think you should check that out if you're a patron. Go back to some of the summer ones. But yeah, so I'm loath to reference him, but also he happens to be the person that's like best positioned to like report on this because he is a business reporter. But yeah, and there's actually more on this that I didn't realize made it. And he clearly comes down on there's no reason to buy this sort of side of this, but and he does congratulate the Packers for fleecing fans this way. So he does have a little bit of Rovell in this piece, but he points out there's other reasons that this is like kind of dumb. So one, in the agreement that you make to buy the share, and I wish I knew this when I was talking to Justice, the Packers can at any time exercise an option to buy it back for 2.5 cents. So you pay $335, and the shares are worth the only transfer that can ever occur, because it's illegal to transfer between individual people, is the Packers buying it back, and they've got an option to just buy it back for 2.5 cents. They wouldn't do it, right, because it's a fundraising principle, but if there's some kind of legal arrangement, the NFL changes its rules on what ownership constitutes or whatever, right? If the NFL no longer wants to have its business put out there because of a nonprofit, that has to be taxed like a for-profit, but still has to publish all of its data, and they require the Packers to consolidate as a regular owner. The Packers could conceivably buy it back for 2.5 cents, which is now what the share is worth. There's over 5 million outstanding shares, so you bought 1/5 millionth of the organ, which also means, of course, that the share cannot be worth the $300, right? Because if there's like 5 million shares, and there's like an ownership group that has gained, like the initial ownership group that has gained value, that would mean that the Packers are worth $150 billion, right? If I'm doing the math right. Let's see, hundreds, thousands, millions. But yeah, $150 billion. So the shares cannot constitute one equal percentage of the ownership of the team just from a valuation perspective. So that makes no sense. And And also, none of the money obviously can't go towards player salaries and bonuses. It can only go towards like stadium improvements and stuff like that. And so it doesn't actually like help the team in any like real way. It just, and stadium improvements while we're talking about it, it's a high school stadium with like metal bleachers, right? And also, technically, in the agreement, and I didn't know this until I read the Rovell article. So, props to Rovell for actually doing something that I wanted to be informed of and was informed by. According to these rules, you have to follow the rules that NFL ownership has to follow. And so if you violate the like behavioral principles of the NFL, they could, in theory, take your shares away and fine you up to $500,000. You agree to that when you sign. Now, that would never happen. Just like if the NFL forced the Packers to consolidate, they would likely buy the shares back for at least $300 and not 2.5 cents. But they could, in theory, exercise by virtue of the agreement that you signed, fine you $500,000, take your shares away. And if you don't pay it, they might be able to sue you. I don't know. Like a breach of contract, or buy back your shares for 2.5 cents. So, yeah, and Rovell concludes at the end of this piece that because it's not actual stock, which is why it's not regulated by the SEC, right? It confers you no ownership benefits. You do not receive any investment benefits. You don't get dividends on the profits the Packers make, even though it's a nonprofit, that's a for-profit. So it's not regulated by the Securities and Exchange Commission or the Southeastern Conference. And Darren Rovell concludes that the SEC shouldn't even allow the Packers to do this, to call it a stock. It's because, it's, well, I already mentioned it's a $1.5 billion organization that has a Patreon.
So when we bring Justice back for the second to last
weeks.
For the second to last game of the year, I feel like instead of actually previewing the game, you should just hammer him but more so than you did, because that was a fun.
Right.
That was a fun interview. But
and remember, the Packers in the Justice ownership era are 0-1.
This is an undisputable fact. So thank you to all of our Patreon people so much. We really do appreciate it. Also, you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well if you'd like to donate a one-time donation. Or you can be like so many amazing people and go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up a holiday shirt, or the holiday socks, the Christmas socks that we've got out there. You can pick up a Norse Code onesie for your child. All sorts of options out there over at norsecode.threadless.com. All right, let's get into the game. And I don't even know what to say after this one. This had all of the makings of an absolute heartbreaker, and I knew that this was coming. As far as like the way that the game,
the heartbreak portion of it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
sure. I have tons of texts being like, Jefferson's got over 100 yards in the first quarter. I can't wait for the heartbreak at the end. Like I can't. I'm just anticipating all of this going downhill. And it didn't happen. And I think the first thing that we need to talk about is that, because if you're a Vikings fan, you've likely heard from a Packers fan telling you that interception should have counted as an interception, or the interception that was negated by the helmet to helmet. So can we talk about Kirk Cousins, his attempt to throw the game away, and how the Packers weren't able to secure the win through the motion, like through the entire motion of going to the ground?
Yeah. So one thing is that I was kind of surprised that second interception wasn't ruled an interception upon review and let the call on the field stand, because I thought it was close enough. I mean, at the time, after I saw the replay, I thought it should be an interception. I guess kind of the more I've seen it since then, which is not like I didn't Zapruder it or anything like that. I didn't go frame by frame, but I saw a couple of screenshots and I watched the video again with those screenshots in mind, and that can kind of poison the well. But I do think the ball does actually hit the ground while it's out of his control before it bounces back up. But I thought it's pretty close. I thought that maybe they would call it an interception. But Cousins actually, I think he had made the right decision on that throw, but he just threw it, and that's actually what Cousins said after the game. And I think that's an honest description, because later he talks about an amazing play that he made and says it was a bad decision, right? And so it was like, okay. In this one, he just said that, the trajectory of the ball was too low. It was too much of like a line drive. He should have arced it over the safety, which I understand why he didn't do it, because at the time of the throw, Savage was on top of Jefferson and he undercut the route when the throw got out. but there was more space available for Jefferson to genuinely contest the ball further downfield. So he should have thrown it over him. So it's not a bad decision. It was just kind of a trajectory issue, not even an accuracy issue, just kind of the way that you throw the ball issue. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of why that, like, you take a look at at Cousins' what was passer ratings like 122, his adjusted net yards per attempt was like 10.25 or 10.22 or something wild. Like, it's very good. Like, it's better than anybody's season-long adjusted net yards per attempt this year, right? So it's obviously kind of an elite level statistical performance. But you take a look at what was PFF grade was not even top 5 among Vikings players, right? Like, let me take a quick look at the offensive grades. His PFF grade was 64.8, so above average, right? It wasn't that great, right? Because he had the sack fumble, if I remember that correctly, and then also I don't know if PFF counts the interception where it was the helmet to helmet, but they certainly count in a turnover worthy play from Cousins on that savage throw. I mean, the rest of the game he did a bunch of really great things, stuff that actually we don't typically see, and I'll talk about that in a second. But yeah, I mean, this game was played, I think, actually, to use a phrase from Cousins, on the razor's edge, where you could make the argument maybe that because of this level of play, or because of the way that he played in high leverage moments, that the Cousins, quote unquote, doesn't deserve the win. But conversely, the Packers did not demonstrate that they deserve the win because they have to make the play, right? And so that's kind of the other end of it, is that it's a close game. So honestly, nobody outright deserves the win. But in order for the Packers to claim that because of these plays that they deserve the win, they have to make the plays. And that's the other element of it.
It was uncomfortable sitting and waiting for the kick. And once it became clear that that's what they were going to do, they were going to burn the time, or they're going to burn time until the very last second, and then bring out the kicker. I am not alone in my feel, and being at the stadium, you had tweeted as much, that no one really felt all that comfortable waiting.
Right, yeah, everyone
for
agrees that this was like the right decision, right? Don't risk the possibility of a turnover or the possibility of going backwards by running scrimmage plays. Just kind of secure the ball, run the clock out, make sure that Green Bay doesn't get the ball back, right? These are all the correct decision, and then kick a field goal from 29 yards, which has certainly an above 87%, but about a 90 or better percent chance for an average kicker to make it, right? And so everyone agrees that that's the right move. You shouldn't call a game any differently. But also, it feels like you're setting yourself up for disaster. And
we've just been hurt so many times.
Yeah, and like after the first kneel, I was like, wait, this is a 27-yard field goal. Like, Jesus, right? Because it's not just the 27-yarder at TCF, right? It's also the 27-yarder earlier this year that Greg Joseph missed. I think the Cincinnati game was the game winner. And so, like, that number is stupid, right? Like, it doesn't matter. But, that number just kind of sticks in your head. And then they kneeled again for another 2 yards. And it's like, oh, yeah, there's another down. Okay, it's a 29-yarder. Don't have to worry about it. But, yeah, it's just, it felt like... And obviously, like, here's the thing, like, this was for the win. They were tied, right? So if he misses the kick, you go into overtime. There's no reason not to do this, engage in this series of plays. But if he misses the kick, that the Vikings aren't going to win in overtime. That's just how it works. We've seen this play before,
and
right?
They're not even going to win the toss.
Yeah, it's going to be another. And the worst part is it's not going to be as quick as a 75-yard touchdown on 1st and 10 from the Packers, right? The Packers will win the toss, Vikings will kick a touchback, they take over the 25, and it's going to be an excruciating 11-play drive. Like, that's what it is.
Where they're not going to settle for a field goal, they're going to punch it in.
Oh, yeah, 100%, right? And so that's what happens if Greg Joseph misses it. Like, now that I can't be proven wrong on this one, I 100% believe that if he misses that, the Packers win the toss, something that you can determine with 100% certainty, the outcome of that coin toss. And then, they receive the ball to touchback, and they drive 75 yards down the field on somewhere between 10 and 13 plays. And there's a feeling of inevitability. And the worst part is that on that drive, there's going to be a 3rd down they convert and a 4th down they convert. That's the worst part.
And probably one of those is going to be as a result of a penalty on the Vikings.
Yeah, maybe even Everson Griffin, right? Like it's there,
Lined
right?
up
It's
entirely on their side of the ball.
yeah, he's facing the wrong direction. He's next to the left tackle. He's next to Yaswa Nyman, lined up as if he's a tackle. Yeah,
There are a few things you can bet on in this world that are absolute certainties, and we
and if Greg Joseph misses that kick, that's what's on the line.
yeah, it all goes to hell. Well, all right, let's talk about the game, and let's talk about we can talk about Kirk Cousins' performance and the offensive strategy, because it really felt like they were trying to air it out early, trying to air it out often, and trying to get as many yards to Justin Jefferson as they could.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. So he gets 104, 103 yards in the first quarter on 3 targets, 3 catches, no touchdowns, right? In the first quarter.
Correct.
It's very funny. One almost touchdown. And he had the ball. Did you see that screenshot of him reaching out from the 5?
Oh yeah, no,
extremely funny.
The whole time it was just like I, just trying at this point.
Yeah, I'm like worried too. I'm like, is he gonna fumble here? Like he doesn't have a pristine. Like he fumbles. Like that happens. Is he gonna fumble here? But no. He got the ball away from the defender, right? So it's actually pretty difficult to fumble. But but yeah, almost a touchdown. So yeah, after that, I was like, yeah, I bet he doesn't get the ball again until like the 4th quarter, which doesn't happen. But he doesn't get the ball for the entire 2nd quarter, which is very funny. So he was able to finish the quarter with finish the half with the exact same stat line. But no, he had a really phenomenal performance. Finished with 169 receiving yards, nice, plus 3 rushing yards. I don't know, like he did a really phenomenal job finding ways to get open. And it wasn't just, because, Rasul Douglas wasn't a great corner. I mean, he played well, right? Because you could put up Adam Thielen against Rasul Douglas probably wouldn't get that many yards. And Adam Thielen's obviously a very good receiver. Jefferson did a really phenomenal job in that respect. And I think that, I wouldn't say this is a coming out game because he just had such a phenomenal year last year, but I feel like we were kind of waiting, right, for him to have like a fairly pristine performance this year. Like he had 140 yards against the Chargers. So he had a really phenomenal game, last week. And then he had 100+ yards in 2 other games. I think one of them was Seattle. I remember that. And the other one, probably Detroit. But he had a couple of 100-yard games. So I'm not saying that he didn't, have some really good games. But it really felt like that this one felt like the culmination of what was promised from his rookie year, that you would have games like this where he was this dominant. And, one of the incompletions wasn't even, his fault, right? It's the Jair Alexander pick, or not the Jair Alexander, the Darnell Savage pick. He did like a really excellent job demonstrating that he can be a screen catch receiver, although his yards off screens weren't like amazing. They were reasonable. He can be a short receiver on slants. He can be an intermediate receiver, and he can be a deep threat. And that's kind of the coolest thing about it, is that it felt like for a bit that the Vikings might be struggling to create a deep threat. And I mentioned in the run up to the draft that maybe the Vikings would be looking for a speed receiver just to take the top off. Not that Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson can't win deep, but that they don't alter the coverage of the defense because of their threat to go deep. Kind of like Will Fuller, right? Like Will Fuller is not, the best receiver in the NFL, right? He's not in the top 15 and probably not in the top 20, but his relationship to the defense is such that it changes what coverages they can run. And the Vikings could really use that, especially if they want to be kind of a run game defense. And I think what Justin Jefferson does in this game is demonstrate that you kind of have to cover him like he is that guy, and then he can also beat you short and really punish you for adjusting your defense that way. So really phenomenal work, good hands from him. A bit of an issue early in the year, or for actually a good chunk of the year, his ability to kind of reel in some of these throws. But this is the Justin Jefferson that we expected to see, and it was nice to see kind of confirmation of that. Not like a good game, but like a truly great game.
Yeah, if you look at the total yards for Thielen, for Jefferson, and for Cook, this was a game where the stars came out and they played well. And if you're looking defensively from the Packers, this is exactly why you lost. Yeah,
well, aside from maybe some unfavorable officiating, which is kind of a point that the Packers can make, right? But I don't know. You've got the greatest quarterback of all time figured out. But like, yeah, I mean, they lost because they couldn't. First of all, they couldn't take advantage of their own stars, right? Because what I mean, Devontae Adams is their skill position star, right? Because they don't have. I mean, Justice says AJ Dillon is better than Aaron Jones, but right now Aaron Jones is a star running back, right, for the Packers. And other than that, they've got Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams ends up with like 115 yards and 2 touchdowns, but it really felt like he wasn't driving the game. Like Marquez Valdes-Scantling did more to kind of drive the game in an important way. Like Adams had some pretty good moments. I think he specifically beat Peterson just the one time. Let me check what PFF has. He beat Peterson twice, but only for 20 yards. But he primarily, like, he shows up in the red zone, between Kendricks and Xavier Woods for a touchdown. He ends up, and kind of Xavier Woods was having issues throughout the game, but he ends up just kind of taking advantage of some opportunities here and there. He's not driving the game in the way that Jefferson is driving the game, right? And so the Packers lost because the Vikings stars were able to do what they wanted to do, and they couldn't take away those stars knowing that was the threat coming in. The Vikings obviously didn't handle Devontae Adams well, but I think the bigger problem for them in terms of leverage plays was what Marquez Valdes-Scantling did, which, I've talked about it all season. My issue with the Vikings defense is that they might be good game to game in terms of EPA per play against the pass. They might be good overall in terms of their structure, but they just don't have a cornerback who can run. And so against a guy that can run a 4-3, in which case MVS is, they don't have it, right? And MVS got over 100 yards just against Woods, so that's not like the majority of the issue. But I think that if they had a guy that could run, you wouldn't be lining him up against Woods. You'd be lining him up against that guy who can run. But yeah, the ability of Adam Thielen to kind of win in these high leverage moments on third downs, and these phenomenal sidelines, because he had like 2 really good plays on the sideline, if I remember correctly, like 2 really just like toe tappers, right? One at the end of the game and then one in the middle of the game where Cousins threw it to. It felt like on that other throw that I'm describing, it felt like Cousins was throwing it out of bounds, at least from my vantage point in the press box. And it actually was perfectly placed that only Adam Thielen could get it. He gets it. He keeps his toes in. Just like high impact plays like that peppered throughout to kind of help supplement, I guess, which is kind of a weird way to think of Thielen, but help supplement what Justin Jefferson did. Just like a really great performance. Dalvin Cook is kind of interesting just because his longest gain was 13 yards. The number of runs that he had that were successful was very low. His successful runs were really good. And then also he made kind of one of the smarter plays of the game on it wasn't 1st and 7. It created 1st and 7. But at the very end of the game, when he got the ball, he turned it outside and he went down instead of going for a touchdown, so that Aaron Rodgers didn't get the ball at the end of the game. Really smart move. And again, part of this is how you should play the end of the game in this scenario that sets up the kick that makes your stomach turn into knots. But credit to Cook for that. And then also I think Cook's biggest impact might have been not from the yards that he got, but from his pass blocking, which Cook is not like a particularly great pass blocker. And I think he even gave up like a quarterback hit at one point in the game. But there's a really great moment in blitz pickup where he sets up, I think, Jefferson's second big play, the 40-plus yarder instead of the 50-plus yarder, where the Packers blitz and Cook just stonewalls the guy. Again, he's not like a great pass blocker, just generally speaking. But in the couple of pass blocking reps that he had, and if the Vikings are going to have these shot plays and go one back more often, they're going to ask this of Dalvin Cook a little bit more. That was good to see for him to have that impact and help enable, because I don't think Cousins has that accuracy on that throw if he's got a defender in his face. And so that might be kind of the biggest thing that Cook did in the game, besides deciding to go down.
This was a fun game on offense. This seemed like, for for most of it anyway. This seemed like a Vikings team that was trying their best to just keep the gas, or to keep the foot on the gas, to ramp this up, to actually, to keep your foot on the neck, do something to not let the team come back. And you still give up a 75-yard, one-play touchdown to Aaron Rodgers. And you gave up, if I can just take a moment and mention the touchdown that came when he attempted to call timeout on the field.
Oh, my God.
I get that that's sort of along the same lines as, the pump fake when you're already past the line of scrimmage. I'm just saying it's a really crap thing to do.
Well, I don't think Rodgers did that intentionally. I will say that. But I would hate for this to become a thing, right? To be and it would be difficult to figure out because it happens after the snap but before he receives the ball. And so you'd have to time it just right to screw up a defense. It very much seems like Zimmer isn't giving his defenders that excuse, because when he talks about that play, he talks about how the cornerback stopped up because he read a route incorrectly and he thought that the route was going to be a hitch when it turned out to be a fade or a corner. So there is that. But I would really... if it becomes a thing, I think that's grounds for an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, right? I really don't like that happened because of that, but I wouldn't argue that Rodgers probably did it on purpose. If it ever happens again from Rodgers, I would think that he loses kind of benefit of the doubt on that. But I really dislike that occurred, just because it creates the potential for it to occur in the future on a more intentional basis.
Just ridiculous. I remember just sitting there and going, how on earth is that legal?
I don't know, what do you do about it? Because it's like, if you stop the play because a player calls a timeout after the ball is snapped, you've done what they want, right? And so you can't reward that by stopping the play. I guess maybe you could penalize it, but there's no penalty in the rule book for attempting to call a timeout mid-play. I don't think, right? If there was, they probably would have called it. They weren't being light on the Packers in this game from a flag perspective. So I don't know what you do about that, except if it happens at a somewhat persistent basis, you begin calling unsportsmanlike conduct penalties. But it's kind of like when a fan whistles from the stands and it sounds like the exact same tenor and tone from a referee whistle. You can't give that fan what they want and stop the play, right? And so the players just have to not respond to that somehow. And it just sucks. So I don't know how you could write a rule around that. Maybe actually write a rule that specifically penalizes timeouts after the ball has been snapped. But you could only give it a penalty because you can't stop the play. And if there's no penalty right now, I don't know what the refs could do about it. It sucks. Maybe make it a penalty. I think that would actually be smart because I don't see a downside to it. When the ball is snapped is my answer to anybody who objects to an accidental, that version of that. And I think it should only apply to offensive players, right? Because they have control over when the ball is snapped. But crazy. I hate that it happened.
Yeah, it was, Roger, we can have another set of Rodgers rules. I'd actually be okay with it on this one. That was just,
right, yeah.
Of all things, that just seemed wrong. That it could have possibly have happened. And of course, it negatively affected the team. It looked to me just, and I've watched the playback a couple of times, whether or not the defender was in the right spot or whatever, it looked like the team had just stopped playing for a bit. There was nobody anywhere near Adams at all. This just, he called timeout. Oh, he didn't call timeout. The fake spike, but less legal.
Yeah.
So it just, anyway, let's talk about some happier news. All of a sudden, the Packers were not getting any of the calls, and the Vikings were getting all of them. And much to the delight of Vikings fans who've never really been in this situation, and to the absolute, I would say detriment, it was a hell watching that for Packers fans, because all of a sudden they weren't getting anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's this might land me in some trouble. When kind of the discourse about, quote unquote privilege, which people like hate talking about. One of the things that comes up is that when so the quote is, when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. Right? I feel like, so a lot of times this is just like, hey, we're correcting for stuff like redlining or whatever, right? We're correcting for societal imbalances. The people who protest that aren't necessarily hurt, except that they're denied opportunities that they had unfairly gained, and so that they protest that and they think that it feels like oppression. They're getting oppressed. Who knows if there are some contemporary examples that we could draw upon? But certainly, I think when it comes to penalty luck in the Packers, right? And let's call it luck for now. That kind of applies, right? If you're used to the refs calling things your way, and that seems to historically happen. I feel like fan bases of other teams, not just fan bases of the Vikings or fan bases of NFC North teams, fan bases of other teams have felt like that this has been the case, even for the Packers when they don't play them that often. If you're used to that, and because you're a fan, that's a thing, right? If you're a fan and you think that the calls that favor you tend to be more correct and tend to be like objectively true, you see this on Twitter for every fan base. So if you think that the calls are correct and they tend to go your way, when they suddenly don't go your way, absolutely it looks like the jig is up. It looks like awful officiating. It looks like it's somehow rigged against you. Famously the refs, rig games in favor of the Vikings. That's why they win so many close games, is because at the end of games, refs make critical calls that help the Vikings out. It very much feels like that when the calls don't go your way, that something is deeply wrong with the universe. And in a way, it kind of is, right? Because the natural order of things as it was doesn't account for this. And so there is something kind of upset in your understanding of the way that this game works. And so I've seen a lot of fan bases talk about how the penalties favored one team or the other, even when, statistically you can say, hey, the penalty margin for both teams was about equal when you compare them. They both had 10 penalties for over 100 yards, and then you come back and say, well, the penalties that were called on you were egregious, and the penalties that were called on the team I cheer for were ticky-tacky, and so the refs were, because some team might objectively have committed more penalties, so the refs were biased against us. It just so happens that it comes out to look like equal penalty play when actually your team deserved to have more penalties occur in the game. Fan bases will always come up with kind of that, but I've seen a lot of games where the Vikings have won, where the refs have played a role in a close game because of their calls, and I've seen fan bases say, hey, the Vikings only won because of the refs, or hey, the refs kind of rigged the game in favor of the Vikings, or whatever. I don't know that I saw it to the degree or the intensity in a long time anyway. Maybe this isn't the most I've seen it, but in a long time, as I have with kind of the results of this game, where I've seen Packers fans complain a lot about the officiating. I mean, it seems like the bigger sticking point is that Vikings fans shouldn't be proud of the Vikings because the Packers are not good. This one specific game, they're 8-3, right? But this one specific game, they're not good, so it doesn't count, except in all the places where it counts. So that seems to be the bigger thing, but I've seen a lot of Packers fans kind of complain about the officiating going the wrong way. And honestly, in this game, there are calls that I don't agree with that, because the way the rules are written, should be called. So that includes the Kiki Kingsley roughing the passer penalty. I don't think that should be called. Also, that's how the NFL has been calling it all year for basically every quarterback, right? And I say basically because I'm sure there's a quarterback that is getting it a little bit less often, maybe a Kyler Murray or Lamar Jackson, a guy who can declare himself as a runner. But it's a helmet to helmet, so that's going to get called. I don't like that that's a penalty, because that one looked like a fairly incidental example of it, but that should be called, right? The defensive pass interference that I think it was Darnell Savage against Justin Jefferson on the Kirk overthrow. I wouldn't even call it a throw. I think actually the throw was fine, and maybe that's where PFF kind of dings him. I think Justin Jefferson, this is another example where Jefferson maybe misread the play a little bit, because we saw that in the previous game where he misread a throw. And he slowed up when he should have sped up. And I think this is another example where he just kind of misread where the ball was going, and he slowed down, and he shouldn't have. Either way, Darnell Savage runs into him, right? Because it's as if it were like, a classic underthrow DPI, the Joe Flacco special, the Carson Wentz special, whatever. Joe Flacco is active and he's playing, he's starting. That's wild. But that thing where because of the physics of the game, it's not really, there's nothing the defensive back can do about it, but because the way the rules are written, you have to call it DPI. That's another example, right? I don't love that that's DPI, but it unquestionably is DPI, right? There's like another penalty here or there where I think the false start on was it Lucas Patrick, which then came back because of the Everson Griffin penalty, literally the very next play, and then the play after that, Everson Griffin gets officially credited with the sack. It actually later turns out a stat correction that Armand Watts gets it, but that false start, 100% a bad call, right? But there's not actually many where they're objectively bad calls. There are some 50-50 ones that go against the Packers. But I don't think that there's that many objectively bad calls aside from that false start. And I don't know that that happened on the other side. So, from that perspective, there is some imbalance. But we're talking about a 5-yard penalty on first down, right? That's not really the same as some of the penalties we've seen, like lest I bring up the 2009 championship game, Ben Lieber's pass interference, right? Like, good God. We saw a version of that, I think, last week, too, where we just didn't get an explanation from the refs for a different team. I forget which game. But, the holding on Billy Turner, I thought that kind of made sense. The illegal use of hands, again, on Billy Turner, I thought that kind of makes sense. Maybe the holding on Elton Jenkins. Maybe that one wasn't great. Maybe that one was a little bit too ticky-tacky. But yeah. And the Everson Griffin roughing the passer. That's another one where I guess I get why they called it. But I don't love that they called it. It doesn't matter because it was a touchdown anyway. And it was enforced between downs. So like Mason Crosby got to kick from the Packers got to kick from the 50. That's why. Which the Packers actually did something smart, is they didn't kick out of the back of the end zone. But that one's a body weight penalty. That's the Aaron Rodgers rule being applied for Aaron Rodgers. But that's the nature of the rule. So yeah, there's a couple of ticky-tacks that got called against the Packers that might be 50-50, but there's only one or two where I would argue that that's not a penalty. So it's not as egregious as I think the discourse from Packers Twitter had it out to be. It's just you're not used to that. And so it seemed like, the fix was in.
It was nice to just watch that happen and be confused as to why the Vikings were just, winning all these.
You see a flag on the field and you're like, this again. And it's on the Packers. You're like, oh.
You're like,
yeah, all right.
Wait, that was called in the offensive backfield. The hell? Oh, that's clearly got to be illegal hands to the face. No. Oh. Well, that's darn near lovely. Thank you for that.
The rare holding on a defensive lineman.
Yeah.
The 1 out of 1,000 times it happens. Yeah.
Exactly. Defensive hold. Really? Are you sure on that? All right. Yeah. So I guess the other thing I want to just mention is the defense, because the defense seemed pretty strong, pretty stout for the first half. And once again, in 2021 Vikings fashion, this was a team that gave up another 10-point plus lead and nearly lost the game for the Vikes.
Yeah, in 4 straight drives. So if you don't include the Jordan Love kneel, which he executed that beautifully, getting everything they wanted out of that first round pick. But yeah, so the first drive was a field goal, which I thought was pretty decent defense, especially against the Packers. Second drive was a punt. Third drive was a missed field goal, which I don't know how much I want to give the defense that, because they kicked it from like the 14, right? So it was like a 30-ish yard field goal. So it's not as if the defense forced them into such a weird field position that a miss was likely. But still, a missed field goal, and then the next drive was a punt. And then the next 4 drives, excluding the kneel, were touchdowns. And end of half drive, of course, classic Vikings. And then the only drive that Green Bay had in the third quarter, because the Vikings took up the first half. I think they had a 6.5 minute drive at the beginning of the third quarter, and then the Packers had a rest of the third quarter drive, kind of. And the Vikings took like the last 4 minutes of the third quarter into the fourth quarter. So there's only one drive from either team in the third quarter. That one was a touchdown. And then, of course, the next two were touchdowns, including the final one, which was just one play. Mike Zimmer mentioned that he thought that the reason was because they were kind of a little bit too proactive with adjustments, I think is maybe the best way to put it. It's not really the phrasing he used. He just said, hey, we changed up some things that maybe we shouldn't have because it was working in the first half. And I think when you hear that kind of absent, kind of the context of how a defensive scheme evolves over the course of a game, it really feels like, well, why aren't you doing what's working? If it was working before, why wouldn't you just stick with it? And that's intuitive, and maybe, and he says he should have just done it anyway. But I want to say that it is not as unreasonable as it kind of sounds when it's put like that, because Zimmer historically is actually one of the best halftime adjustments, which is not really a thing, but like you can measure it by looking at points given up in the first half versus the second half. Historically, outside of 2021, he's one of the best in the NFL at adjusting and preventing second half points. One of the reasons he does that, or that he's so good at that, is that he anticipates kind of how, and we've seen Bill Belichick do this too. He anticipates how an offense is going to adapt to what he does, and anticipates that by calling a defense in just a different enough way to make that response falter. And so you know what your opponent's going to do by figuring out how you think that they would react to what you've done, and then put your reaction out there before they can do it. And that's why he's been so good in previous years, right? At the second half. Like it's his second half points given up versus as a percentage of total points given up is one of the best in the NFL over the course of like this 6-year span, right? And so it's not just that he's fielded good defenses, and so that's why the second half points are so low, just because generally the defense is good. But as a percentage of the number of points that the Vikings just generally give up, it's pretty low. So as a person who adjusts to the flow of the game, he's historically very good at it. Obviously, that hasn't occurred this year, but you wouldn't expect something that has worked for like 6 years to suddenly not be like, if he doesn't adjust at all and the Packers do this, then you're like, well, why doesn't he adjust? It's classic Zimmer. He doesn't adjust, because that's like one of the narratives about him that's not true, is that he doesn't adjust. He does. And in this case, he did. And it was too much. The Packers continued to run kind of a very similar offense to the one that they were running before, the halftime break. And it just started working against the adjusted defense. So, the Vikings were a little bit more aggressive. They figured that the way the Packers would continue to play would make blitzes a better kind of opportunity for them. And that aggressiveness really hurt them, of course, on the 75-yard play, but also in a couple of the other plays, like on the drive prior to it. I think they blitzed a couple of times and allowed a couple of first downs that on previous plays, they weren't blitzing. So, I think that in this case, this is just a case of the Packers kind of outmaneuvering someone by standing still, as it were.
It was different to watch. Like you just sat there as a Vikings fan watching the defense do the same thing they've been doing, especially in the 2-minute drill, giving up that touchdown that seemed inevitable. And you're just sitting like, could we please just do something to stop the Pack? I don't understand what sort of weirdness that exists. What sort of curse exists as involving like 2 minutes on the clock and everything? But seriously, let's shore up something. The fact that the Vikings have given up so many points during the 2-minute drill is ridiculous. But one thing I do want to mention is the Vikings have an absurdly high red zone to touchdown ratio at the moment.
You mean on offense or defense?
On offense.
That's interesting because of how at the beginning of the season, Zimmer was talking about how, that's something that's just not working out for them. They need to get it fixed. And a couple of times when they haven't finished in the red zone, the Vikings, either Kirk Cousins or Mike Zimmer, right, have said, hey, we need to fix that. And in some of those instances, the red zone rate was actually fine, like 2 out of 3, right? That's not bad. Like you should. If you should be so lucky to consistently score touchdowns on 2 out of the 3 times you make it to the red zone, right? But it feels like wasted opportunities, especially if like a turnover gets you the ball in the red zone. But right now, that's the rate the Vikings are. They're at a 67% conversion rate in the red zone. They're fifth in the NFL, right? So they've got a really high red zone conversion ratio. But the narrative that we've gotten throughout the season is actually that they're pretty bad in the red zone. And the problem is we just remember a lot of misses in the red zone and also close games. And so you see these missed opportunities as game swinging, which in a way that they are, but they are outperforming their capabilities in the red zone, despite the fact that that has been kind of a concern all year. Like, what, the red zone offense is underperforming. No, they're at 67% in the red zone. They're the fifth best offensively in the red zone in the NFL. They're good at red zone, and they practice it all the time. It's kind of interesting. But I think one of the reasons is not just that they design like these really good red zone plays, which they kind of do, right? I think that it's difficult to be good in the red zone without doing that. But we have to remember that one, red zone efficiency tends to regress towards the mean. And a better marker of an offense is how often you get to the red zone per drive, which I didn't do my research before this episode to try and figure out, what that is, right? But it tends to regress. But it's not necessarily because it's random. It's because teams constantly kind of adapt to red zone play calling, right? And so you design these really good red zone plays, teams adapt and figure out what you like to do, and then you have to counter adapt. And so a regression occurs as a part of that kind of essentially a negotiating process between the two teams over the course of a full season. But the Vikings are designing some pretty good red zone plays. They also have a really good red zone receiver in Adam Thielen, right? And the guy I want to compare him to in this capacity is someone that I think from a body type perspective, you wouldn't think to compare him to at all. From a tired football comparison perspective, you would, but I think in play style it actually makes sense, and that's Eric Decker. And it's not because they're both white. It's because even though Decker's like 6'5", 220, right? He was a really good red zone receiver. He didn't win in the red zone like Alshon Jeffrey or Brandon Marshall or Demaryius Thomas, even like teammates he's had, right? And not because he's won like them where he and he was a physical receiver. He doesn't out physical them at the catch point, box them out, and consistently find ways to get the ball using his strength and size, like a tight end might or like Brandon Marshall might. It's more because he's a good enough route runner that he can create space in areas where you wouldn't typically find space. And Adam Thielen is doing the same thing on these slants. He's turning these plays that are just slants, there's not even an option route in them, into what look like option routes for defensive backs, and they're spinning around. And he's finding really great ways to find space. And so he is a good red zone receiver. And that's one of the reasons I think that, so I've been on a couple of fantasy podcasts, especially before the season. And one of the things that they constantly, which is why I bring it up on Twitter, one of the things that they ask me is, hey, Adam Thielen's a regression candidate, right? Like he had 14 touchdowns last year. No way is he going to repeat that. And I said, yeah, in a sense, he's a regression candidate because I think it's unlikely he'll get 14 touchdowns, which he's on pace for more right now. So, who knows? But I think that he's going to get a very high number of touchdowns because if you look at his career, his touchdown numbers are actually pretty high, 6 to 8. I think he had another year with 10. So like he's a touchdown guy, but more importantly, they consistently go to him in the red zone. He gets high red zone target numbers, and the Vikings have not replaced Kyle Rudolph with a red zone threat because at the time Irv Smith was healthy, Irv Smith is not a red zone guy. He's a 6'2" tight end that thrives, winning with speed, and he doesn't create space. He's not a phenomenal route runner. And so he's not a red zone guy. He's a really good blocker. He's got great speed. He's got pretty good hands, but he's not a red zone guy. I didn't anticipate, obviously, that Tyler Conklin would have this big of a role. But, I said that Tyler Conklin might eat into some of these, Kyle Rudolph targets, but it's very unlikely that Conklin will see as many red zone snaps as Kyle Rudolph did, because that's the only thing Rudolph was good at by the end of his tenure with the Vikings. So they used him a lot there, and he was good there. So they're going to replace a lot of these red zone targets with Adam Thielen because he's good at it. And that's what we've seen this year. On this play, it wasn't so much that Adam Thielen created a bunch of space so much as he ran through a couple of dudes on a screen. But I think that reason that worked is because he's so good at winning off of slants that's what they were anticipating before the ball got to him. So, the Vikings have been good offensively in the red zone. Interestingly, this is the only year where they've been, I think since 2015, since they've been actually poor defensively in the red zone. I think they're like 25th in the NFL. defensively. And I expect that to improve because the Vikings have otherwise been somewhat regression proof on red zone defense. And if not, if that just happens to be the case over the course of like a 6-year sample or something, they should still regress to the mean, right, which is about 15th. So I would expect them to do better kind of going forward in the red zone defensively.
Well, let's wrap this up because we've got plenty of stuff to talk about, including the preview of the 49ers game and everything. But what are the last things we should talk about on our way out here?
Yeah, well, I think Kirk Cousins played pretty well outside of the big plays that were mistakes that we just talked about. I think that the thing that stands out to me is that Cousins was under a tremendous amount of pressure. I haven't looked at the pressure percentages from PFF. I could probably do that. But whether or not he was under pressure, right? I think he only ended up taking 2 sacks. It was very clear that the offensive line was losing from play to play to play, right? Like there's no way to get around that. And God, he was under pressure for 46% of snaps. And the magic number that Sam Monson always uses is 40%. It is very difficult for a quarterback to win with a pressure rate above 40%. I just had an article a couple of weeks ago that talked about this where I tested that out, and quarterbacks with a pressure rating of I think like 41%. It was like basically there. Have a really low winning percentage, like a remarkably low winning percentage. And here Cousins not only has a pressure rate above that at 45%, but he also prevented a number of pass rush losses from turning into pressures by getting rid of the ball quickly in anticipation of a blitz or whatever, right? So not only does he prevent pressures from arriving, he also did a pretty decent job of making sure that those pressures were not as impactful as they could have been, right? So obviously he throws a couple of picks under pressure that should have been picks that weren't. But actually, of his turnover worthy plays, I think only one of them occurs under pressure, and that's the roughing the passer one. And then the other ones actually occur in a relatively clean pocket. So it's not even that. But he navigated the pocket really well. Like, he did a good job kind of moving around in the pocket in a way where you felt that he doesn't typically do. Like, his pocket presence is primarily composed of anticipating blitzes and getting rid of the ball and not knowing when pressure is arriving. That's one kind of big element of it. And the other big element of it is moving around in the pocket so that the pressure doesn't impact your throwing platform. And then the third one is, the timing of knowing when the pressure is going to hit you. And he doesn't have any of those elements, I think, from a career-long perspective in terms of his skill set. But in this game, he showed all three of those elements. And so I thought that Cousins did a pretty good job in that perspective. I thought he was really accurate with the ball. There were like a couple of plays here or there. I think there was a crosser where I felt like, hey, he didn't lead the receiver. But I think for the most part, that's almost nitpicking. I don't know. But he had a low pressure to sack conversion ratio. He had a low pass rush loss to pressure ratio. And he had a pretty good performance in terms of, where he was putting the ball under pressure. So, yeah, I think Cousins had a really good game. I think that you have to account for the fact that he threw picks that just didn't get counted as picks and that he fumbled the ball. So he didn't play as well as like 125 passer rating. Like that number does him more credit than he deserves, but he played well.
All right, well, let's go to our interview then, because we have another game to talk about. Because of the Thursday Thanksgiving holiday and all that, we're not going to be recording 2 episodes. We're going to be stuffing 2 into 1. And so right now, how appropriate indeed. We are going to go to an interview that Arif conducted earlier today with the chief people dude over at 49ers Hub. That is directly from his Twitter bio. Evan Sowards, who we've had on the show before. He is going to be talking about the 49ers. And Arif, let's go to the interview, and we will be coming back at the end of the mailbag.
All right, I'm here with Evan Sowards of 49ers Hub to talk about the 49ers game. Obviously, the Vikings just finished their game against the Packers. Obviously, people are riding on a high and stuff like that. But James and I are absolutely not going to record on Thanksgiving. So this is what you get. We'll have a combined review preview show. And for that, we brought on a guest to talk about the 49ers, who are inscrutable to me. I do not understand them, and I also have not learned much about them in the past couple of weeks. So Evan is going to have to carry a lot of this. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm good. Heard you just got back from a wild wedding, so glad to pull you out of that and back into what constitutes the real world for football journalists.
I am glad to actually have a voice to be able to speak on the pod today.
Well, hopefully we can fix that by the end.
Oh.
We'll run you through the ringer. So we're just going to go through like the position groups real quick. Hopefully we don't spend too long talking about stuff. I tend to go on, but we have a huge show, so hopefully we can get this sorted out really quickly. As always, we talk about the offense first. I don't understand Jimmy Garoppolo. So from my understanding, for the past 3 weeks, Garoppolo is among the league leaders in things like EPA per play, ESPN's total QBR, etc. I also know that like Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk are these really incredible after catch receivers. But I have to combine that with the fact that ESPN's QBR takes that kind of stuff into account, and he's still kind of at the top of these lists. So tell me about hot Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I mean, so I am the right person to ask this because I feel like I am Jon Snow, Battle of the Bastards, Game of Thrones, with the sword just taking on the bad guys running at you all the time. I'm like the one person left defending Jimmy. But what it is, and I think it's actually really
interesting. They also say I'm the right person to ask if they were like, oh man, you don't want to talk to Evan. That dude's crazy. He likes Jimmy.
Well, but I like to stay within what I consider to be logical arguments. So I don't like to be sensationalized, and I do like to look at things from what I would hope is a fair perspective. But to answer your point in the beginning, before this week, the 49ers game that they had just won over the Jacksonville Jaguars, Jimmy Garoppolo in the last 3 weeks, so starting with the Bears game up until that point, had been running primarily shotgun, and that has been completely different throughout the rest of the season. And in this new approach to how you want to handle Jimmy Garoppolo under shotgun, he was the highest graded quarterback, period, throughout those 3 weeks. This week, they actually didn't run as much shotgun, and they did have him under center and some different variations, and he still was just as good. And kind of the incredible theme throughout these 4 games with Jimmy is efficiency. He's playing with what we, remember 2017, even a little 2019, when Jimmy first joined the team in 2017, didn't know the playbook. He was, lights out on third down, very efficient, quick, really, quick, accurate passes. And that's kind of where he's at right now. I can go for days and days into what's happened before these 4 games. But what I can say, just to summarize it, is George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk are all getting the ball, and it's absolutely making a difference. Deebo Samuel can be argued to be the most dynamic offensive player in the NFL currently, with what he's able to do from the running back position as well as the receiver. And Brandon Ayuk, who was kind of in what they call Kyle's doghouse for the first 5 to 7 games of the season.
He's got like a famous receiver doghouse, right? Like Dante Pettis was in it.
Right, yeah, I'm pretty sure like his dog, like the doghouse in itself is like actually like more of a compound, right? Rather than just a house. They have like security guards and everything. They're all armed. Kyle does not mess around when someone pisses him off. And there was some rumors that Brandon Ayuk had missed curfew week 1 and it kind of dragged on. But like I said, all the offensive skill players are really making a difference right now. George Kittle in the end zone is 3 for 3 with I think it's like 15 yards and 3 touchdowns. So maybe keep getting him the ball. And things are just clicking. The defense is playing well too. But that's kind of the story right now. The offense is just clicking, and Jimmy's not making any mistakes.
All right, so ball's getting out on time, ball's getting out quickly. He understands where he wants to go with the ball. And so he's reading defenses pretty well, pre-snap, post-snap, getting the ball to playmakers who then, of course, make plays. What is it in, let's say, these past 4 games, past 3 games, what has been kind of the cause of, if there's ever been moments where he's looked uncertain or he's had, a couple of poor throws in a bit, what has thrown him off over this like remarkable stretch where he's played well? What in the moments where he is a little bit off, what works against him, it seems?
Yeah, so, and once again, this might be the part where I get a little biased, but like I said, I always want to look at common.
You're going to say nothing?
No. So, the beginning of the season with, George Kittle being injured, Brandon Ayuk not getting the ball, You saw Jimmy throwing the ball to Mohamed Sanu and Trent Sherfield and, players that you're kind of like,
Are we going
why?
to slander Sanu?
I'm not going to slander Sanu. I'm just trying to explain that your three top playmakers weren't getting the ball, and on top of that, Jimmy wasn't as accurate. He wasn't maybe making the right reads. It's kind of hard for me because all I do is sit around 49ers Twitter all day long, where there's no real professionals that are paid to do this. Really going, you might get a Baldy breakdown, but it's just a bunch of fans that are like, well, Jimmy, he could have made that pass to the guy running down the field, and that would have been a touchdown. It's like, yeah, but you can't, it's all kind of looking in the rear view, trying to be critical. So it's hard to say, but I can say right now, Jimmy gets to play with all of his playmakers. The running game is working. Like everything is clicking. In the beginning of the season, when they weren't winning, right, they were dropping balls, right? Debo, as good as he has been, Debo was like leading the league in drops at one point. There was a game that they absolutely should have won where George Kittle had a fumbled ball that they scored on. It's just, there were so many little mistakes on the other side of the field. The defensive side, they were missing a lot of tackles. It seemed like a kind of a discipline thing.
For the past couple of games, it felt like, aside from against Arizona, I suppose, it felt like the 49ers were fairly in control of these games. I am fairly familiar with what play-action heavy offenses, the Shanahans, the McVays, the Kubiaks, what those offenses can look like when they're not in control of the game, when they don't have the lead, when they don't have the ability to kind of select between run and pass. The Vikings have also had a 7-point lead in every single game that they've played this year, and a couple of 2-score leads as well. And so at some point, there is a decent likelihood, maybe, that the 49ers will be playing from behind. Do they have a capacity to play from behind, given the nature of that offense?
I think there's a lot of variables that go into that because of all the different things that happen on, the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball. But to your point, let's just say, can Jimmy do it? I think so. I think when you're efficient, I think when you have the weapons around you, and I think when you have the play caller that is Kyle Shanahan, I don't think you're ever really out of the game. If you look at all of the games this year that the 49ers have lost, they were out of the game when they made mistakes that they couldn't come back from. And I think in the beginning, there was some games like against the Seahawks, right? And against the Colts, even though the Colts just absolutely dog walked the Bills. So who knows? Maybe the Colts are good.
No good teams.
Right. By the way, I've been saying that consistently. This year, there is an anomaly. There's no such thing as a dominant team. Even in college, every good team.
Well, no, Georgia's good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then watch. They'll play Alabama and they'll lose. So.
Yeah, exactly.
But, I think all the times that they did lose, it was because they didn't have, Brandon Ayuk wasn't in a position where he was getting the ball. George Kittle was out of the game, right? Those people that you really rely on to win games weren't there. But I mean, yeah, when you have this type of efficiency on third down that Jimmy Garoppolo has right now, are you ever really out of a game? And by the way, is there a better defensive player in the NFL right now than Nick Bosa?
Probably Myles Garrett. I don't know, man.
Coming off of a ACL, he has 10 sacks and 15 pressures.
That just means he's more impressive, right? Because he's coming off an ACL. It doesn't mean he's better. I mean, those are two different things.
10 sacks is pretty impressive. But yes, so if your argument is Myles Garrett, you can understand the people that Nick Bosa's in the conversation.
Yeah, Nick is the superior Bosa right now. This is interesting. Yeah, by a good margin.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you have that, you have both of those sides of the ball with people that can make an absolute difference. You're never really going to be out of the game.
All right. So I think we kind of assumed, especially given the start at the beginning of the year, that we would see a lot more Trey Lance either as like playing quarterback or as playing as a sub-package player who happens to line up at the quarterback position. Is that dead now that Garoppolo is on this streak, or are we going to see sub-package Trey Lance, or what's going on?
It's impossible to tell because, if you look out the entire season, right, in the beginning, they were trying to do it a lot. And then when Jimmy got injured, and Trey had to play against the Cardinals, it seems like all they wanted to do was run the ball. He gets injured, hurts his knee, and it seems now they're a little bit more hesitant. But Kyle, in his interviews, is saying, no, we want to get him the ball. He is very specific when he answers. He's like, in this game we wanted to, but, we started, we're playing from behind, so it just never felt good. And then, the last two games, he basically was like, honestly, the offense was rolling and I didn't want to mess that up for Jimmy. I think at the end of the day, the goal for Trey Lance was always let the guy start next year. Let him sit for a year. Jimmy went to, took him to a Super Bowl. They've got better playmakers. And I think if you look at the last 3 games, last 4 games compared to the beginning half of the season, you could understand that sentiment of why you would want to play Jimmy. But, right now, this is, I think, what Kyle always wanted. Kyle thought he could win a Super Bowl with Jimmy. And, he knew that he had the ceiling quarterback, right? Josh Fields is probably, better now. Mac is probably more prepared now, but Trey Lance has that higher ceiling, and he didn't want to rush that.
All right, well, let's move on real quick to running backs, starting with the least interesting question. Is Kyle Juszczyk overrated or underrated, and is that a separate question for whether or not he's overpaid?
I mean, I can answer all of them, and I think he's not underrated, or he's not overrated. He is underrated, and he is not overpaid. I mean, like at the end of, it's not traditional. And I think a lot of the times that's the problem that people have when it comes to what Kyle's doing, right? You in this case, if you trade 3 first-round picks for a quarterback, you think you're going to play him, right? You don't expect to have the fullback be this integral part of the offense, but from the running game to the blocking to even the little pass plays that he has. I mean, Jimmy's felt very comfortable converting third downs and to Juice. And I think, the Juice is a weapon in the same way that Debo's a weapon, right? And Kyle is just a very creative guy that knows how to get his players the ball. And I think, you can put $1 price, a price on that. It's about 5 years,
you can.
$25 million.
They did.
Yeah.
How much is Juszczyk getting paid?
I think it's like 5 and 25.
All right. So that means the market tells us that Taysom Hill is a better fullback. Would you trade Taysom Hill for Kyle Juszczyk straight up?
So I completely disagree. The market doesn't say Taysom Hill is a better fullback. The market shows that the Saints have absolutely no idea what they're doing.
No, the invisible hand, the cream rises to the top. That's how markets work.
No,
the Saints are rational
not.
actors in a perfect information market, and they have used their first mover advantage to secure a $10 million a year contract for football player Taysom Hill.
Yeah, you know what? This is what I think is hilarious. Last year, remember, they wouldn't play Jameis because Jameis had a stipulation in his contract, right? They'd have to pay him a bunch of money if he ended up playing. So they're like, well, we're forced to play Taysom Hill. And this year, they're like, well, now we're going to re-sign him. So you wanted to save money by playing him, and now you want to spend money by keeping him. Like, I don't know. None of it makes sense. I don't think that even if Kyle Shanahan had a Taysom Hill, I would be excited about him.
So you would not trade Kyle Juszczyk straight up for Taysom Hill, despite the fact that Taysom Hill is getting paid twice as much?
Absolutely not.
Wow. A non-believer in the market. All right. Running backs. What is happening here? I don't know. I have no idea. I've got like a couple of these running backs in my fantasy teams. Mm-hmm. Sometimes some of them do all right. What should I look for here? Who even plays running back for them? So
you ever seen the snake eating its own tail? Tail.
The Ouroboros.
Right.
Yeah.
It is literally. It's the same flow chart that it's always been. Right. Rookie running back comes in. The running back that is supposed to be the starter gets injured. Rookie running back takes over. Oh my God! Rookie running back is the newest, greatest thing that Kyle Shanahan's ever had. And then rinse and repeat over and over. And, it was Matt Breida and then Raheem Mostert, now Elijah Mitchell. And the funniest part of all of this is they traded up into the third round to take one of the more talented running backs in the draft named Trey Sermon from the Ohio State University.
Yeah.
And literally shout out to Kyle Madsen with Niners Wire. I believe he had like a top 10 list of like the running back, committee who's on that depth chart, and it was like number 5 was like, I don't know, man. Number 7 was like Kyle Juszczyk, and like number 10 was fine, I guess, Trey Sermon. Like, they don't want to play him. Right now, Jeff Wilson is coming off of a major injury, but he is healthy. He played yesterday, and he played fine. I've definitely seen a lot more out of other running backs. Elijah Mitchell is definitely the starter. Kyle likes Elijah Mitchell. If he's healthy, that is who will be starting. I can definitely tell you that. I would love to see Trey Sermon personally. But yeah, I'm pretty sure Trey Sermon hates Kyle, or Kyle hates Trey Sermon. I don't know. Maybe Kyle's like a big Michigan.
Hey, maybe the doghouse extends to running backs.
Well, actually, it does. And once again, I am just some guy. I'm not going to pretend that I have sources. I am not going to pretend like I'm some insider. But what I will say is, I have heard rumors, very unsubstantiated.
Sure.
If you remember,
reporting. Got it.
Right. If you remember, week 1 was the Ohio State versus Oregon, and shout out to my Oregon Ducks. They stomped out Ohio State. There was rumors that Trey might have showed up a little bit late to practice, maybe showed up a little hungover. Very unsubstantiated rumors, friends. And then also that maybe, he's been having issues like showing up to team meetings and things like that. And I don't have any proof of that. But if that is the case, that would sure explain why you trade up into the 3rd round to take a running back with Kyle Shanahan, who seems to just make any running back
produce.
I mean, he could.
But they've also paid for running backs, right? Like, they paid a weird amount for Jerick McKinnon way back, right?
Yeah, but that was different though, because that was back when they literally had the worst roster. He was coming in. No one wants to play for the team, right? They were not in a place to compete, so they're like, okay, we have to throw money at somebody, right? So they, Quan Alexander and Jerick McKinnon, and
what are you going to do? Money burning a hole in our pocket. We have to,
right? They're like, we just need to field a team of 53 people, and Trent Baalke had decimated that.
All right. If Raheem Mostert was healthy, would he be starting? No?
I think so, but I think Raheem seems to be Kyle's first love. But I see Elijah Mitchell really, honestly, like playing that same type of role that Raheem has. I mean, Elijah can kind of do everything.
So here's the thing that strikes me about Jeff Wilson. I could be completely wrong. This is just me watching a couple of snaps over a couple of games. Jeff Wilson seems to play like a power back, even though he's like the same size as all these other tiny fast.
Yeah, he is a little strength back. My favorite thing during the 2019 season was, like, he was the 3rd string, maybe even 4th string running back, but Kyle loved playing him goal line. So he had like 7...
like 5'11", 210 pounds.
Yeah, but he had literally like 7 touchdowns or something on like a total of 45 yards. Like, just an absurd stat. Like, it was almost as if Kyle was like, you'd like look over at John Lynch and he'd poke him in the side and be like, watch this. Just to do it, like, for no reason whatsoever. But I was a big proponent of, like, I tweeted, I was like, so help me God, if when Jeff Wilson comes back, he starts over Trey Sermon, I'm going to lose it. Because I'm a big proponent of, if Kyle's this good at undrafted free agent running backs being, from Arian Foster and Steve Slayton all the way down to Duke Johnson and then Raheem and all the above, why wouldn't you want to bring a higher talented running back into that system and see what Kyle could do, right? So, but yeah, Jeff Wilson got the start. Not even close.
Not even close, baby. All right. Let's talk about George Kittle. Why should I still be excited about a guy that in the preseason everyone was calling the best tight end in the NFL and now just feels like kind of an afterthought?
First off, watch your mouth.
Well, I'm just saying.
Watch your mouth.
I used some weasel words. I said seems like. Other people say.
So once again, I am the right person. I genuinely am the right person to ask this. So 2019 season, we did have a pretty bad offensive line. They were using George almost the entire season as an extra lineman. You watch the film. Period. The Minnesota game. I'm sure you remember.
2019, didn't he get 1,000 yards in 2019?
George Kittle?
Yeah.
It would have been the quietest 1,000 yards. Let me see the actual.
Let's take a look at this.
1,053. Yeah.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah.
No, but he was. No, I'm
75 yards a game.
I'm not joking though. He was very much so used, way more than he should have been, to block. I mean, you have to remember he also had a 1,377
he was coming off of 1,400 yards. Like, I get it.
He can do more.
Yeah.
But like towards the end, I mean, once again, you remember the Vikings game. Like, they didn't throw the ball. And so I am of the camp that George Kittle's not getting the ball enough. And our offensive line is better this year. You know, get Trent Williams, like Tom.
But hold on. If Jimmy Garoppolo is so good, if he's the bee's knees, why isn't George Kittle getting the ball more?
Well, so George was injured for a few games, and since he got back and is healthy, he's getting the ball.
All right. So let me take a look at this. Now that I've got the stat page pulled up. All right. We got against Arizona, which we didn't see Jimmy, right? We had 8 targets, so that's 101 yards. Then against the Rams, it's 7 targets for 50 yards. Then against Jacksonville, only 4 targets, 34 yards against Jacksonville.
Right. Mm-hmm. And so let's give context, right? I am okay with that in this sense. I still want more targets for George Kittle, but I can at least understand it when Kyle is a run-first person. He wants his offense to be run first, and you now have Brandon Ayuk playing like rookie season Brandon Ayuk that you expected to get, right? Remember, there was a talk at some point, and I'm sorry for your listeners, that Ayuk and Jefferson were, as good, and Ayuk might have been better. Obviously, Justin Jefferson took off with that, and that is no longer the case. But I think when you have, that Saints style offense back in the day with Marquise Colston and all those guys, right? When you just have a lot of people to get the ball to. So I do think Kittle should get the ball more. But if you look and you see Debo had 8 rushes on top of his catches, on top of the targets Brandon Ayuk got, I can understand how it's going to be hard to spread the ball around.
All right. So is Kittle blocking as well as he's done? Because obviously, the appeal of Kittle versus Kelsey, although Kelsey's gotten a lot better these past 2 years at it, is that Kittle is this all-world destroying blocker, and then also he happens to be a 1,000-yard capable tight end in kind of the Gronk mold, which is like not what you're getting with Darren Waller. It's not what you used to get with Travis Kelce. So he still has that punch.
He is without a doubt the best blocking tight end in the NFL. It's not it's not an argument. It's not close. He genuinely is. And I mean, these are some really big fan 49ers things that probably other, teams and fans don't see as much. But if you watch Brandon Thorne, who I'm sure right, the offensive line guru on Twitter.
Yeah, Brandon Thorne torched that one dude that was like, yeah, I just don't think Kittle's tough enough.
Yeah, and they literally every week are posting new videos of Kittle taking grown-ass linemen, offensive linemen that weigh probably a solid 100 pounds more than him, and putting them on their butt. Kittle is doing so great as a blocker. He always has been. If I was running the San Francisco 49ers, though, I'm going to get the best guards possible and maybe shore up that right tackle position and say, you know what, Kittle, you're the best blocking tight end in the NFL, but we don't need that. Go catch the ball. He's way too dynamic of a receiver to just be spent the whole time blocking.
All right. Who is Ross Dwelley, and should I know him?
No.
Cool. Next question. Let's talk about the offensive line. Is Trent Williams a Hall of Famer?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, cool. That's great. All I need to know. Okay, so he's playing at a really high level right now. Also, I saw a tweet. I didn't see the game. I saw a tweet that said he just tagged out in the middle of the game because he's like, "Ooh, I'm a little tired. I'll get back in a second, coach." What happened? Is that true?
Yeah, okay. I don't know if it made national attention, but this game against the Jaguars was probably the funniest Trent Williams game because he had a great game. But what some people might not have seen is towards the end of the game, they lined him up eligible as a receiver one play, and he didn't get the ball, and he, who knows? And then 2 plays later, I've never seen an offensive lineman get forced the ball in an attempt to get him, to score a touchdown. I mean, literally, Jimmy threw it. The guy, Trent was double covered. An offensive lineman, it was so blatantly, obviously going to him. And after the game, they were just laughing. I mean, they were literally just screwing around. They were laughing about it. And Trent had said to Kyle, or that, they had said basically that Trent, since the day he met Kyle, wanted to score a touchdown, has been like pushing to get targets in a game. And so, yeah, I mean, between Trent Williams, the tight end, and him saying, "Hey, I'm gonna take some plays off," it seems like they were having fun, and it seems like him and Kyle have a really good relationship.
All right, so you've got a couple of names that I recognize just for various reasons. So Alex Mack, for example, played center, I think also for the Browns, but definitely for the Falcons. Has a lot of familiarity with how the system is run. Has been in the past a really high-level center. I think there's at least 1 year where he was a top 3, if not top 1 center in PFF system. How is he playing right now?
Playing good. He is. He struggled a little bit, I think, getting comfortable. I think it's hilarious, but apparently he's got a sweaty hand problem. So they give him a hard time amazing. About that.
Right. That's better than Garrett Bradbury's alleged swamp butt. Probably. We don't want the explicit rating on iTunes, so I'll just call it swamp butt.
Yeah.
But a sweaty butt seems to be like a more concerning situation, but sweaty hand results in like actual fumbles.
Right. And so I think like they were talking about how they actually keep multiple hand towels on, Jimmy and him and other players that want, constantly.
Aren't there like powders for that, or is that not allowed? Baby powder has to be allowed.
I'm sure, but like I think it's that big of an issue that they've got like contingency
it's
plans.
Bleeding through the talcum. All right.
Yeah, but the reality is, and I think the most interesting for outside fans and just fans of the NFL in general, because it's always fun to make fun of the Lions. Lake and Tomlinson are one of our guards.
I was gonna ask about Laken. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, he was cut by the Lions.
Yeah,
literally cut. He was
a
second round pick or like a first round pick. Got cut. He's genuinely playing into probably being paid one of, if not the highest paid guards this coming contract time. He's playing lights out. Absolutely dominant. I mean, he literally is just not making mistakes, not allowing pressures, and it's just incredible. I mean, there's zero. The Lions drafted this man with a very high draft pick, and they let him walk. And they were like, "Oh, you're not playing good enough." And he's like, "I'm gonna go play the best I've ever played on the Shanahan 49ers." Good job, Detroit.
Daniel Brunskill was a guy that I wanted the Vikings to sign a little bit ago when he was on the free agent market. I think that he signed before he actually hit free agency with San Francisco, if I remember correctly.
That's correct, yeah.
So it was unfortunate for like my takesmanship, I guess. I don't know if the Vikings would have been interested. But since then, he hasn't played as well as I thought he would, but he also hasn't played poorly. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, he's never been like something to write home about. He's just one of those guys that like if he doesn't have any big mistakes and he does decent enough, you're like, oh, he did his job, right? He's just a role player in every sense of the term role player. And yeah, he's done well for, I think, his expectations. I think he's exceeded expectations and he's played decent enough. It probably also helps that he's played with Joe Staley and Trent Williams and a lot of other pretty impressive offensive linemen.
Who is at right tackle?
So that's what's funny. So,
oh, good. Okay.
So, Tom Compton, who I'm sure you're
Former
familiar
Viking.
with, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely terrible.
Yeah. Famously.
Just laughably bad. So we have a rookie that we drafted in the 3rd round that does not play right tackle, but we were like, I think a little like, let's see if
the Notre Dame guy?
Jalen Moore.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and so they're like, let's, we'll have him swing over to right tackle. And I think it was like less than 5 plays in the beginning of the Jacksonville game where they pulled him. Immediately, we're like, oh, this is a bad idea. They have a really good pass rush. So Tom came back in.
Did Josh Allen rush off of that side?
I don't know if it was Josh, but that Wilson kid got a sack almost immediately. I think it was Cedric Wilson or something.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I mean, literally, I don't know if I've ever seen someone someone start and be pulled as quick as Jalen Moore did. But he came in and continued to play in spot coverage and stuff like that. He did okay.
I was thinking of Aaron Banks. That's who I was thinking. Notre Dame.
Aaron Banks, another. I mean, well, let's just put it this way: the 49ers desperately need help at corner, and they passed on Asante Samuel Jr. to take Aaron Banks. And Aaron Banks has not played football for the 49ers yet.
Cool. Yeah, it must feel good.
We were literally just like, high-fiving each other, like, oh, hell yeah, just because
Hold on. So the first round pick, the second round pick, and the third round pick, not starting.
Nope.
Cool.
Things are going great. My favorite thing was when we had an injury at guard. And then, also DeAndre Lenore, who played really well in preseason and played decent in the first game or two. And then,
Senior Bowl all name. Yeah.
Right. Blew one 45-yard touchdown pass. And, I mean, he's been a ghost since. And, Josh Norman and Drake Kirkpatrick, can't do anything whatsoever. I mean, Norman, for the longest time, was getting more penalty yards than anyone was getting receiving yards, and sometimes more than were being thrown. And Lenore's just sitting on the bench, and they're like, "No, he's not ready." Drake Kirkpatrick, that's what we need out there.
Amazing. All right, real quick, let's talk about the receivers. What is the difference stylistically between Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel?
I think Brandon is just more of that. It sounds like it's a dig at Deebo, but you can't watch Deebo right now and consider what he's doing, that way. But I think Brandon just has that more complete route tree. I think he's the more complete, wide receiver. Deebo is obviously much more talented in other ways and has been dominant all season long. But yeah, I think, Ayuk can be your more traditional wide receiver one, used in different ways as far as the receiver goes. But Deebo's just a bowling ball with long arms.
All right, so Deebo. So since about 2012, teams have been trying to find, and not very hard. I'm not saying this is like a holy grail quest or anything like that, but teams have been trying to find kind of the Percy Harvin gadget type player that can run the ball, play from the slot, have incredible yards after the catch, and run through people, which you don't see a lot. And so we've seen that from Randall Cobb a little bit before he transitioned into being a fairly regular receiver. We saw that in the drafting of Tavon Austin. The Vikings tried it with Cordero Patterson. We see a little bit with players like Ty Montgomery. And these players typically don't pan out unless it's, again, like Randall Cobb playing just like a normal slot player and less like a Percy Harvin style player. It seems like Deebo is doing that, and he also has power. I don't think he has quite the stopping agility of Percy Harvin, but that's
probably also why he's got more intact ACLs.
Yeah, but it feels like he might be that model going forward. Does
100%.
that feel right? Yeah.
I also think, first off, whenever you can use a Pokemon reference when it comes to football, it's important that you do that. So I will here. I think the 49ers have been looking for the evolution of Pokemon for their receivers for a long time, right? It started with Michael Crabtree when they thought they got this really sure-handed, right? Jim Harbaugh famously said he's got the strongest hands he's ever seen. But he, never really got to his potential. Then they signed Anquan Bolden, who was a bigger, beefier, stronger, sure-handed dude, doesn't drop the ball, yards after the catch guy. And I think Deebo is the final form, right? The final evolution.
He's the Charizard of sure-handed receivers?
I think so, right? I think because it's in the same way that Charmeleon didn't have wings and Charizard did, I think the wings, that's what I'm going with. The wings is the run game, right? And let's bring it, we'll wrap it all the way up on that reference, right? And that's what it comes down to. It's Deebo, I mean, literally, once again, Deebo ran 8 times. He had 8 rushing attempts for 78 yards or something yesterday. He's better than most teams' actual running backs.
Hey, you're a dork. All right. Other receivers, Juwan Jennings, Trent Sherfield, Travis Benjamin. Do we need to know about them?
I mean, I think Juwan Jennings is just interesting in a sense of the game. So, coming from Tennessee, undrafted, had some character issues, but reasonably talented. Once again, another sure-handed guy, right? It's they love this, but almost not production related. I loved his kind of blocking and jamming up with the Jaguars player yesterday. And the Jaguars player rips his helmet off, tries to swing at him. And Jennings arguably is a rookie with character issues. So we're all oh dear God, everyone, please grab him. But he just fully composed, just smiling. That smile that you want to punch in the face as hard as possible.
Is that the Heinz Ward smile?
Oh yeah, literally, like helmet gets ripped off. The guy's like freaking out, trying to swing at him, and he's just smiling in his face as he's walking back, laughing, and the guy gets penalized.
That's the worst.
Pretty sure the guy got ejected. So should he be talked about? Who knows? But that was pretty cool.
All right, defensive side of the ball. Before anything else, is D'Amico Ryans going to be a head coach next year?
No, I would be happy if next year D'Amico Ryans wasn't the defensive coordinator.
Oh, okay. Everyone's talking about how he's like on the rise. You know, obviously people remember him from his playing days, which were not that long ago. I'm not old. And people have been talking about how, like, you know, he picks up the game quickly. He's the next rising star on the defensive side of the ball. Not true.
No, I honestly, this is not a knock on D'Amico. This is more about what Kyle needs. I think a lot of the issues that Kyle's had all year long, and just in general, right, when you talk about the doghouse and you talk about some of the personnel decisions they've made, everything in general, just kind of screams to me that there's no, like, veteran mentorship and leadership and voices in this organization, right? Jed is a notably very young owner, right? Rookie offensive coordinator, rookie defensive coordinator, right? John Lynch is kind of a GM, but not really. He's doing his best, learning from, people, whatever. But my point is, I think a lot of the issues that they've had as a team this year and some of that, like, disciplined and all that comes from there not being any veteran presence around him. I would much rather have signed Dan Quinn this year, who's got head coaching experience, who's got more of that, veteran leadership. And obviously he's doing very well with the Cowboys, than D'Amico, who's going to have growing pains. And we're on a team that really just can't afford to have growing pains, as you see, because we are 5-5.
All right, so let's real quick. I didn't do this on the offensive side of the ball, but it seems more prescient on the defensive side of the ball. Some of the injuries seem to have impacted San Francisco. So Jason Verrett, who's always injured, which sucks because he rules. Yeah. Javon Kinlaw, who a lot of people expect to be a big part of that defensive front. D Ford, who tends to start. I don't really want to talk too much about D Ford.
I don't either.
And Tavon Wilson, who I feel like is an important depth piece. Obviously, when we talked about right tackle, we could have talked about Mike McGlinchey for a second. But on the defensive side of the ball, it seems like injuries are playing a fairly significant role. A bunch of teams are injured right now, but it seems like this is maybe not unique. I mean, Baltimore was worse injury-wise, but significant.
What I would say is this. Last year, the 49ers injury list was just massive and monumental, to the point where it was like laughable, right? Someone got injured. We were just like, of course. They've had a pretty, like you just mentioned, long list of injuries this year. But even still, because of how bad it was this year, this seems like great.
We'll take it.
Like Mo Hurst, who we signed from the Raiders, cutting him, we're very excited about this year. Him and Arden Key have been playing great. He's out, right? We talk about, obviously Kinlaw, the cornerback position, all the above. Those are like really big hits. But in comparison, it feels like we're flying high. Dre Greenlaw, who's missed a lot of games at that linebacker position, normally used to playing next.
Yeah, he's DFR, right? So he could return at any time.
From what I think what they said without actually saying is he could have played this week, but it's the Jaguars, so why?
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So yeah, he was good to go. He'll be playing next against the Vikings for sure.
Well, let's talk about the defensive line. So you're saying that Arden Key is actually like good?
Arden Key has 3 sacks in the last 3 games.
That's wild. Why? Well, hold on, but that could just be sacks or sacks, right? They can come unblocked. They can come from scheme. He might not have very many pressures, and they just happen to turn into sacks. Is he playing consistently well down to down?
He is. He's being graded well. People watching the film always have high things to say about him. Arden Key is a great role player. That's what he's supposed to be. That's why he didn't go over some of the guys that went above him. And obviously the Raiders are, it seems like the Raiders, as much as they've won now, is just like in spite of just the laughable decisions that the Raiders constantly play. Maurice Hurst and Arden Key clearly were not getting used properly in Oakland and Las Vegas or wherever they decided to play.
Right. Yeah.
And when you have a Nick Bosa, right, and you have a Fred Warner, and you have some really strong pieces in Kinlaw when he was there, and Eric Armstead. By the way, Eric Armstead's like the most underrated defensive player in the NFL.
I was going to ask about him. I wanted to know if he was disappointing since
he's
trading away Buckner.
Eric is so. because of the Buckner trade, Eric Armstead has been like meticulously criticized at every corner. Anytime he does anything wrong, it's almost as bad. Like it's almost as bad as like how much criticism Jimmy Garoppolo gets, but he's not a quarterback, so it's not as big of a deal. But Eric Armstead has had an incredible year, very solid year, from pressures to just disruption. And I think that's kind of what it all comes back to what we were talking about with Arden Key, right? You've got good players on this defensive line, and you can't stop everyone. So as our good old 49ers legend, Jim Tom Sula would say, everybody's going to eat. Right. And I think that's just what it is. Right. You know, you're going to see guys like Arden Key, and you're going to see guys like Eric Armstead that are they're going to get theirs.
All right. So who haven't we talked about that you want to talk about? Contavious Street, DJ Jones, Jordan Willis, Charles Menahue.
I mean, I think so. Jordan Willis missed the first 6 games of the season, performance-enhancing drugs, I believe. Not much to talk about. I will say this. DJ Jones is a very, very underrated nose tackle.
Dude, everybody on this team's underrated. What's going on?
Well, you know, they're 5 and 5.
Name an overrated player.
Overrated?
Fred Warner. All right, cool. We're good.
No, I say Kyle Shanahan.
Wow. Okay. I mean, I get it, right? It's his win percentage sucks, and you know he's a better that Ben Solak article probably hit a bunch of nails on a bunch of heads on how he's a really good play designer, but that doesn't make him a good head coach. But
yeah, by the way, Ben Solak, shout out to that article because I first off, it's documented, it's recorded. I've been saying this stuff since the beginning of the Super Bowl run in 2019, and everyone was like, "You're an idiot. Go drink a White Claw, you moron." And I'm like, okay, fine. And then, of course, you know, Ben in all of his intelligence, that smart little man that he is.
We don't have to praise Ben Solak too much.
I mean, he's a very intelligent, thoughtful person. I know we all like to make fun. I mean, I don't know him well enough, but like, I know, you know, I understand. But like when it came from someone that's closer to the national media, all of a sudden everyone was like, you know, he's got a good point. And I'm like, I've been saying this. So it was, I guess I give him credit because I appreciate that, like, some of my points were getting traction.
That's okay. You can be upset. I've gotten take sniped before, so I get it.
I don't think I got take sniped. The man does not follow me. That's for sure. I did not think that he sold my ideas by any means, but yeah, it is nice to see him agree at least.
All right, let's talk about these linebackers. So Fred Warner signs a big deal. Analytics nerds make fun of it. Then his PFF grades are only above average, I think. And so some of the analytics nerds, including, or I think I should say primarily, Frisco Josh. You're on notice. We've called you up by name, Frisco Josh. Keeps smugly tweeting about it. Some people have responded by saying, well, actually, if you just take a look at what he's doing on the field, it's still pretty impressive. He's doing really great stuff. It's not being picked up by PFF. And then Fred Warner comes out and he says, yeah, I've been playing pretty poorly. What's the truth here? Tell me the truth.
Well, so, I mean, once again, I don't think he's been playing poorly as much he's been not playing.
Are you going to disagree with Fred Warner expert Fred Warner?
No, okay, so there's a lot of things going on here, and it comes back to this Kyle Shanahan way of life, right? Like John Lynch, the general manager, who pretty good safety, one might argue, like was interviewed, and he's like, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, yeah, Fred Warner got paid. He's playing like trash. Needs to do better. And it's just like so unnecessary. So I think, you know, Fred coming out and be like, yeah.
Is he drunk? What happened? What?
I mean, it was much more professional, had a lot more tact, but like to me, that's how I read it, you know, and it just like, there's no reason to like publicly critique him, but that's what happened. And I think, you know, Fred was kind of like, yeah, I mean, I need to play better, but he specifically said, you know, getting paid this much and having this contract,
it weighed on him, right?
It kind of got in his head, right? He's like, there's so much expectation. It was like, and I guess I get that. I don't know how much of that.
So was Josh right?
I think so. But here's the thing.
Wow.
There's, you know, let's see what happens when Dre Greenlaw, his buddy, comes back and they get to play together, right? Let's see what happens.
Greenlaw's good, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like they played very well together. Dre was obviously a rookie, and you know, Aziz has played lights out in spot duty, but let's just see what happens. the back nine, if you will.
Would you take Patrick Willis's career or Navarro Bowman's career?
Well, I would take Patrick Willis's career, but there was a point where Navarro Bowman did, I think, have like he was so arguably like, oh, he's better than Bowman.
He was better for like a good chunk of time, like 2 years maybe.
But I mean, like, I would never pick one or the other. Well,
I would never pick one of the. You just picked one.
No, and say in terms of like, let me finish. Can I finish? No. But in terms of like, they were both absolutely robbed of Hall of Fame careers, and it just seems like picking one or the
Willis
other.
is still going to the Hall of Fame.
I mean, I hope so. I think so.
Absolutely.
I think I think he should be 9 all pros. But yeah, Bowman and him. I mean, it's not fair that players of that caliber. I mean, have we ever seen Navarro, Patrick Willis comes out and is just like immediately like, wow, this is the best linebacker in the NFL. And then Bowman comes out. They're like, wow, I'll never forget Takeo Spikes in his like 50-inch neck was like, a veteran at this time and like really not, playing okay, but whatever. And Harbaugh was playing him over Navarro Bowman. We had a year of Takeo Spikes instead of Bowman because they were like, no, we're going to play the veteran. So I feel like Bowman was robbed of what could have been another even better, a year to add to it.
He was a third-round pick, right? So you can't.
That's correct.
You can't put him on the field. Patrick Willis, first-round pick. Got to put him on the field.
Right. How could you?
Yeah. As we know, 49ers love putting their early picks on the field.
Right.
All right. Big debate. Is it Jaquiski Tart?
Is that how you pronounce it? I think it is Jaquiski Tart.
Right. How does he say it on broadcasts?
I think just Kwaski, but no, or Ski or no, but yeah, it's Jaquiski. I'm pretty sure.
When Jimmy Ward was coming out, and I think even he moonlighted like this as a rookie, he played a little bit of corner, right? And when he was coming out, there was like a debate that he could actually just play corner.
You say who? Jimmy Ward?
Yeah.
Yeah, they famously played him at corner because they're like, well, Trent Baalke, the idiot that he is, was like, I'm going to, I mean, they've been doing Solomon Thomas, Jimmy Ward, Eric Armstead. They're like, hey, this guy did really well in college playing this position. So now that he's in the NFL and it's faster and harder, let's play him at a position he's not comfortable with. And yeah, Jimmy Ward is one of the best safeties in the NFL. He's absolutely playing lights out.
One of the best safeties in the NFL. What safeties would you take above Jimmy Ward?
Oh, that's actually a really good question. I mean, are you like looking to have me say Harrison Smith? No.
I mean, you could say Harrison Smith is washed right now. I wouldn't.
I would say you definitely have to look at like Justin Simmons is playing very high level right now.
How about this?
I would say Derwin James if healthy. But
well, yeah, you'd be out of your mind if you wouldn't.
I would say what Amos is doing in Green Bay is incredibly, impressive. Although we don't talk highly of the Packers on this podcast.
Would you take Darnell Savage over Jimmy Ward?
I just feel like Jimmy Ward is in a more favorable situation.
But you could plop Darnell Savage onto the 49ers and put him into a better situation, right? So like,
I just think that Jimmy. Choice. I don't know, man. It's hard to say because I want to say yes, I would, but at the same time, like, I don't know, man. Jimmy just constantly rises to the occasion. Like everyone has been. I mean, there were people like asking for him to. Fans saying he needed to get cut like 4 years ago, and he's still here.
I remember that, yeah.
And he's playing incredibly well. So it's like I don't think I'm ever betting against Jimmy Ward.
Micah Hyde.
I mean, Micah Hyde's incredible, but I would take Jimmy Ward.
You take Jimmy Ward over Micah Hyde. This is okay. Okay, now we're cooking. I mean, so Jimmy Ward is obviously he's playing well. I'm not like I'm not saying that you're nuts, but like. Man, Micah Hyde.
I mean, let me put it this way. Like, don't you think there's some safeties in the NFL that are benefiting from teams that don't have as good of a pass rush that have, like, give the quarterback a little bit more time to
maybe make plays on the ball?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, Jimmy getting interceptions right now when Nick Bosa is like in the quarterback's face within like a half of a second is incredibly impressive. Like,
Micah Hyde has 2 pass breakups and 3 interceptions, right? It's not
yeah,
as if like he's lighting up the box score, but everyone agrees, that he's playing like lights out really well.
in terms of individuals, I'm sure you can make an argument for a few safeties that over Jimmy Ward. But my thing is this: I think you can always make an argument, no matter who the safety is in the NFL, of why Jimmy is also playing as well, and he's an underdog. There's no reason why Jimmy Ward should be in the top safety conversation, except for the man just absolutely demands it with his ridiculously hard work.
All right, so the cornerbacks we have are Josh Norman, maybe Emmanuel Mosley when he doesn't get randomly benched, right?
Yeah, Emmanuel Mosley on a good team would be like a great third string corner, maybe a second string corner, and he's been the number 1 corner for 3 years now because Kyle doesn't believe in drafting them. Or he actually did. Ambry Thomas from Michigan, 3rd round, and DeAndre Lenore, 6th round, and he won't play either of them.
So it's Norman, Mosley, and Quan Williams?
Yeah, K'Wan Williams is incredible.
Was he with the Browns? I'm trying to remember.
Yes,
he was with the Browns. Yeah.
K1 is also one of the most underrated players in the NFL.
Yeah, okay, come on, man. Everybody on the team is underrated.
Type in underrated K1 Williams and see the articles. It's been talked
about. Wouldn't that mean he's properly rated? If everyone's talking about, that's like saying Robert Woods is underrated.
No, but like on the from 49ers Twitter. No, like go find a single person in the NFC East that knows who K'Wan Williams is.
All right, okay, I'm gonna do a quick overrated, underrated. You have to tell me if they're overrated, underrated, Fair. Or if neither.
Lightning round.
All right, Ayuk.
I think he's perfectly rated right now.
All right, Samuel.
Underrated.
Trent Williams.
The best left tackle in football. Underrated.
Laken Tomlinson.
Underrated? I mean, like he's like
Alex. No, we got to keep going. Alex Mack.
Overrated.
Okay, fair. Daniel Brunskill.
Rated.
Okay, I'm gonna skip right tackle. George Kittle.
I'd say rated right now.
Really, you don't think he's underrated? The way you're talking about him made it sound like he might be underrated.
I don't think. I think he could do more, but if he did more, no one would be surprised. It's what they expect of him.
Oh, fair enough. Okay, Garoppolo.
Underrated. Absolutely.
Elijah Mitchell.
I don't know. He's playing above his pay grade. He's doing just fine.
All right. Juszczyk, underrated. We already went over that. Nick Bosa.
I mean, Nick Bosa is the best defensive end in the NFL. Underrated. If you don't agree, underrated.
Armstead.
I mean, I think in the general NFL...
You already said underrated. You can't get out of this one.
I'm just saying, like, as an 49ers fan, I'm going to say underrated because literally no one wants to give him respect because Buckner got traded and everyone, like, blames him for it. Like, it was his choice.
Fred Warner.
Overrated right now.
Fair enough. All right. Emmanuel Mosley.
Overrated.
Who overrated? Who likes him?
I mean, he's starting.
Yeah, but that just means he's starting. That doesn't mean anyone thinks that he's good.
Kyle's got him overrated, I'll tell you that much.
What do you mean overrated by one guy? He just happens to be the guy in power. That's not...
DeAndre Lenore from Oregon has played very well in the beginning of the season, outside of one...
Well, but you're just making an argument that one player should be playing instead of another player, not that like fans at large or
Listen,
NFL
I'm talking to Kyle right now. This is a plea to Kyle to play your young talent.
Yeah, but if Kyle is the audience, then you wouldn't have said that Jimmy Garoppolo is underrated, would you have?
Yeah, I would, because he treats Jimmy like crap. I can't swear on this podcast. You won't let him throw down ahead of Trey
Lance. He's starting him ahead of Trey Lance.
If he thought that he could start Trey Lance right now, he would. I think genuinely that he thinks Trey Lance is not ready yet, but he will have a higher ceiling.
All right, Jaquiski Tartt.
I think he's rated properly, but it took a while for people to understand that he was actually really good.
Jimmy Ward, underrated. We went over this. Yeah. Josh Norman, I think the instinct here is to say overrated, but I think everyone thinks he's washed.
If I could take Josh Norman and put him on an island where there is no football or football field and he can never hurt people again with his football play, I would do that.
Yes, but I don't think anyone like disagrees. I don't think he's K'Wan Williams, underrated. Robbie Gould.
Overrated.
What?
I mean, first off, Robbie, you have to remember that Robbie Gould tried to hold out as a kicker during our Super Bowl run, and then once he
realized power to Robbie Gould,
right? But then when he realized that the 49ers were actually really good, he's like, oh yeah, contract extension, 2 years, totally down.
Mitch Wishnowsky.
I don't know. I mean, I would just say 4 properly rated, but he's underrated in the sense when the guy tackles players, it's the coolest thing in the world. He lights people up.
So we ended up with I should have kept count, but we ended up with a ton of underrated and 2 overrated.
Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of players when you think of Jimmy Ward and Eric Armstead that they just don't get national recognition, and that's the number one thing.
You have fan brain, dude. You have fan brain.
Hey, listen, not to be that guy, but go watch the tape, right? I'm serious. As far as the people that are in the positions that Jimmy Ward is in and Eric Armstead is in, you can't find 5 players that are better. And most people don't even talk about Eric Armstead. I can't remember the last time a national, he's not even on Baldy breakdowns anymore. It's breaking my heart.
That's incredible. All right. San Francisco favored by 2 at home. What's your prediction?
I don't know, man. I've been waiting to check out of this season for the last 4 games. I just
can't do it anymore. San Francisco's in the playoff hunt.
I know it's infuriating. Kyle loves Kirk Cousins. They have this weird notebook
gonna trade
romance
multiple firsts for him, man.
Right?
What's gonna happen?
I don't know, man. Kirk Cousins won't throw an interception to save his life, and the 49ers need turnovers for them to have, I think, a good chance. And then Kirk Cousins is recorded driving home after the game, and he waves to a Winnebago full of Vikings fans, and I think it's the most endearing thing in the world. So now it's kind of hard to hate him.
That's worth at least 3 first-round picks,
right? That said, as far as prediction, the home game, everything is running on all cylinders right now. So in theory, they should win, but they have disappointed so many times this year. So if they lose, you'll look back at the Colts game and the Cardinals game where Colt McCoy was the quarterback, and the Seahawks.
Colt McCoy.
Right, yeah, 49ers legend, Colt McCoy. And you look at those games and you're like, well, of course, that's why they'll lose to the Vikings. But if they play like they've been playing, they've got a really good chance.
Yeah, but you got to pick one.
I'm going to pick the 49ers. I'm a homer. But what about you? You've asked me so many questions. What about you?
This is a Vikings podcast. I'm asking. They know about the Vikings.
I know, but what do you think's going to happen?
It's going to be a close game. The Vikings are going to screw something up, and the real question is whether or not they'll be able to dig themselves out of their own screw up, because that is all that's happened this year. And they've had 9 games, and 8 of them were within a score. The Vikings have only been in victory formation once this year, which is just nuts. Well, I guess aside from end of the first half.
It's just insane to me that everyone is expecting and joking that Kirk Cousins is always the one that's going to screw it up, can't win the games, and it's he's playing incredibly well.
Yeah, it might not be Kirk Cousins that screws up, right? I mean, they've had screw ups with blocked punts, they've had fumbles from both Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison. They've had drops from receivers, at least at the beginning of the season. It's not happening anymore. There are all kinds of screw ups, defensive screw ups. I mean, they allowed a 1-play 75-yard touchdown to MVS at the end of the game that allowed the Packers to take the tie. These screw ups are everybody, right? Do
you think that Mike Zimmer retires for health reasons after the season if it continues to go the way it's going?
If Mike Zimmer cared about his health, he'd have quit playing or coaching football 3 years ago. That's definitely not it. No, I think he thinks, and he might be right, that his mental health will deteriorate without football because he'll just be depressed, right? So you got to balance that out too.
That is a toxic relationship.
So it's a close game. The Vikings will screw it up. It is a toxic relationship. The Vikings will screw it up. Whether or not they can dig themselves out of the screw up is the real question. And I'm going to say, because the Vikings are experts at getting people to buy back in before punching them in the mouth, they will win the game. So there's a broader, I don't even care how good the 49ers are. There's just a broader narrative force at play here that will overwhelm the X's and O's and the Jimmies and Joes and will control the game so that the Vikings win in order to disappoint fans later?
I swear to God, it's hard for me to understand that you're not talking about the 49ers right now. It sounds
Don't
like
even.
It's the same type of season. So you're basically saying
I'm talking about the Vikings since 1961.
So the Vikings are going to lose or going to win against San Francisco, and then the next week they'll lose against the Lions.
Oh yeah, 100%. No, for sure. Jared Goff's first non-Sean McVay win will occur against the Vikings in Detroit. It'll be, I don't know who plays receiver for the Quintus Cephas. It'll be Quintus Cephas with the game-winning touchdown.
If that happens, Mike Zimmer will fight Kirk Cousins. That will happen.
100%. The fact that they haven't fought yet, the miracle. It's incredible that they haven't fought yet. I think actually every time Mike Zimmer's in a fighting mood, Kirk Cousins ducks him. I think that's what happens.
Yeah. Kirk's little LeBron James. He's just hiding behind the refs, like, get this crazy guy away from me.
I'm out. Whoa! Why do we have to fight so much?
He's like, yeah, you know what? Honestly, you should throw me out of the game. I think that's safe for everyone involved. Get me away from Mike Zimmer.
Just suspend me. I don't know. Just get me out of here. Your mother with a hamster. That's taunting, right? You got to kick me out for taunting.
Oh, right. That's great.
Well, thanks for coming on. I said this was to be a short interview. Predictably, it was not. A lot of insight into the 49ers, even though we had a little bit of fan brain going on, especially at the end.
A lot of it.
But definitely appreciate the insight. You can follow Evan Sowards. How do we follow you?
Well, on my third account now, because I just
Burner, yeah.
And it is literally Burner_Swords, my last name. But 49ers Hub is for all things 49ers if you ever want. I mean, we have really good writers if you're ever, the Vikings are playing and you want to know about the opposition, if you will. There's definitely some great pieces there to check out.
All right. Thanks so much, man.
All right, man. Have a great day.
All right, let's go to the mailbag. And the first question is from last week's guest, Justice Mosqueda, who asks, how did it feel winning your Super Bowl against a depleted Packers squad?
The Packers are 0-1 in the Justice Mosqueda era.
Really, that's all that needs to be said here. Fu asks, why do the Vikings, having won our Super Bowl 8 times since the Packers' last Super Bowl win, make me so sad despite their Tom Brady-level success?
Yeah, so many rings, man. Tons of rings on their fingers. I think they make you sad because they promise you the moon and all you get are rings.
Wow, really? That's what we got out of that? Kyle Slaby, why are Packers fans so salty? Has decades of good quarterback play rotted their brain into viewing any loss as a fundamentally unfair situation, which you'd kind of mentioned earlier, or are they just diaper babies who can't handle rejection because their fake ownership has yet to yield the tax breaks they feel entitled to?
I'll say this. There's nothing endemic to any particular fan base that makes them more or less meaningfully fun or less fun to interact with, except for Philadelphia Eagles fans.
Well, they're all horse punchers, so that's
they're horse punchers. That's just part of Philadelphia culture.
I can't wait for next year to do the live show in Philadelphia or something like that, and just.
Oh yeah, we're gonna walk out with bruises if we walk out at all.
We're gonna come out of the live show and there's gonna be like a horse. There's gonna be like horseback police in front. We're like, oh no, get away! Run! Save the animals.
But I would say it's not something inherent to being a Packers fan. I think it's inherent to being a fan of a team that has had a lot of success or feeling like you have deserved success, right? Because the Packers haven't won the Super Bowl in a decade. But feeling like you're there, right? The Vikings haven't felt like they're there except maybe in 2017, and everyone kind of agrees that was a magical run. And the reason that it felt so magical is because maybe they didn't, they were writing a story about being an underdog more than they were, which I guess the Eagles fans were too, right? Because they were wearing the dog masks. The dog mask was just like you in a lot of these games you were actually favored. I can't anyway. the 2017 story was magical because it wasn't meant to be, right? And so the Vikings haven't felt like they were there. The Packers feel like they're there. They feel like they always have a chance to compete. In the last 8 years, they've won 5 divisional championships. The Vikings won 2 of them. The Bears, with that crazy defense in 2018, won 1 of them. So it feels like they've had a lot of success. They've had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks. They haven't had to worry about the quarterback position. There hasn't been a lot of debate in the Packers fan base, except to dunk on people that have bad quarterback takes about what to do with the quarterback position. So that has created a baseline level that you're just kind of accustomed to. I think if you interact with Boston fans before, 2 years ago, it's the same way. Like, I bet Jets fans think Boston fans are insufferable, right? Everybody thinks Boston fans are insufferable anyway, but I think that kind of the level of success that, the New England Patriots specifically have made them very difficult to interact with in a lot of the same ways. So I think that complaining about the refs, I think that, finding out that, it is possible to lose these games or whatever, that's tough if you're conditioned to 20 plus years. Like, there's a lot of people who their whole life, their entire cognizant life, right, the Packers have been successful. So that you're always in like these championship games. You expect to compete. You're Super Bowl favorites. You can put money down and not feel like an idiot for betting on them. Facing a reality where that's not the case is tough. They've been conditioned by their surroundings to be insufferable.
I like that. Also from Kyle Slaby, the Jefferson sweep carries have been netting small gains in the last few weeks. Is having to play, quote, on tape for teams to plan for even worth a 3-yard carry only once a game at this point?
Well, they did get the 11-yard carry 2 weeks ago against the Chargers. They got an 11-yard carry recently. So it hasn't all been, negative plays. So there have been some positive plays. I think there was a negative yardage carry last week, and obviously this 3-yard carry this week. Yes, I think having it in your playbook is meaningful, and I think the Vikings got a first down on a 2nd and 7, I want to say, when they motioned Justin Jefferson around. It was like a weird orbit motion. It felt like a lot of wasted movement, and it just turned into a screen on the other side of the field. Well, the Packers were kind of, I wouldn't say confused, but they were kind of moving around, adjusting to what the offense was doing. Then they snap the ball, and they throw the ball to Thielen, and Thielen gets exactly the yardage he needs, I think, to convert. So you get that out of it. So will you take a 3-yard gain on 1st and 10 in order to get a 7-yard gain on 2nd and 7 on a completely different drive? Yeah, I think generally you would. But I think it also, you've got this on film. I think that generally speaking, it creates opportunities like a Jefferson throw. Now, mind you, he has a 50% completion rate over his career as a passer. But I think having that in there where they have to defend the throw and the run from an unusual position where they're out leverage is valuable to have that on film. And also you can create plays off of it, right? Like you could do a kind of they've been end arounds, not really reverses, but you can do reverses and you can do triple reverses. And you can do stuff off of that because they're comfortable having Adam Thielen run the ball, right? They've had a KJ Osborne, I believe, run the ball either in camp or in preseason or actually in a game. But I know that KJ Osborne has run the ball from those kinds of situations. And if you're setting up those runs, if you're making those runs kind of a part of something that you have to at least think about, it's going to create opportunities later. Because say you have 3 games where you've got 3 carries that only go for 3 yards, 1 play out of 70. And then in the 4th game, you get a carry that goes for 40 yards. I think everybody would take that. So yeah, I think it's worth it.
Next question is from Tommy Gunn, who asks, for the NFL officiating is clear and simple corner, with the ref overheard earlier in the game saying, I warned you, does this mean the NFL officiating works on a sort of strike count or similar for infractions if it isn't obvious? Example, they can't call holding every play.
Yeah, that actually happens all the time. I think we've actually mentioned this on the show too. That happens where refs will warn players of kind of illegal behavior before they'll actually throw a flag. And this happens most often with pre-snap penalties, which I think is what the I warned you was. I think it was about like the
Head
quick
movement.
motions.
It was head movement.
Head movement. Yeah. Which might have been the genesis of the false start on the center, which I still don't love. But I guess there's a certain amount of time between the head movement and the snap, and the Packers were towing the line there. So yeah, that is pretty normal, especially for whether or not a receiver is cover or uncovered, because you can only have 7 players on the line of scrimmage. So every other player, so the 4 others, have to be off the line of scrimmage somehow. So like one might be a running back, one's obviously the quarterback, and then you've got 2 receivers that might just be kind of like off, or a tight end that's kind of off the line of scrimmage. Refs will very often warn teams, even twice maybe, hey, you're not completely covered, you're not lined up correctly, and they'll do that. And sometimes right before a snap, a receiver will turn to a ref and say, hey, am I lined up correctly? And the ref will give them a yes or a no, and they'll change where they are based off of that, right? And so that's pretty normal, is that you'll get warnings. You can even get warnings on holding, right? They'll say, hey, Elton Jenkins, you're real close, right, to drawing a holding penalty if you kind of keep this up. They'll do it all the time. They won't do it for some penalties, right? They won't do it for, obviously, an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. They won't do it for pass interference because, that occurs rarely enough that like there's not really like a warning. So a lot of penalties they won't do it for, but for a lot of penalties they will, especially pre-snap penalties, and sometimes in-play penalties like holding. So yeah, no, that occurs all the time for both teams. It's not like the Packers didn't get a special deal out of it. And it sounded like Mike Zimmer might have asked beforehand the refs to pay a particular attention to that, and so the refs, indicate like that's pretty normal behavior.
You find that in most sports, especially like basketball or whatever. We're like, when a coach says, "You better watch that because he's been doing this all. I've been watching tape all week. Like I know exactly what he's going to do. Watch this play. Watch this play." Like this is something that happens often. Let's go to Ben for my favorite corner of the episode. For James's good hands, safe driver discount double check corner. Vikings fans angry or excited when Kirk Cousins' on-the-field aggression spilled out onto the highway post-game.
An egregious act of road rage from Kirk Cousins when on the way home from surely a very emotional win against the Packers, against the in-division rivals on the final play of the game. He's driving home with his wife, Julie, and he sees a Vikings, I don't know, Winnebago Sprinter van, right? Yeah. Stryker van. Come on, Arif. And he's like, hey, let's say hi. Actually, Julie was like, hey, let's say hi. And Kirk Cousins driving, just awful. Goes into the right lane, passes on the right lane.
Passes on the right lane is my favorite part of that, actually. that was the day he decided to add chocolate to milk.
Yeah, he's going crazy. He's letting grill marks appear on steaks. He's just going nuts, man. No more rules. Passes on the right, which let's be real, that's the fault of the Sprinter van. You're gonna be that slow, you got to be on the right. But passes on the right, and just I don't even know if we can say this on the show. The hand gesture, to describe the hand gesture that he gave. Those Vikings fans who paid to see the game, paid to see him win, were cheering for him. I'll describe it and then you'll be able to get it. He unfurled his fist so that all 5 fingers were splayed out obscenely, and he shook his hand he pronated his wrist from side to side. Some people might call it waving. Just brutal. I can't. This obscene act of road rage against fans.
Just ridiculous, uncouth. Some have described it
unbecoming of a professional quarterback representing a team. I hope Mike Zimmer talked to him about it.
The only thing I will say is that I don't know if I've watched it with audio. Does he scream you like that? Because I feel like that's prime situation for him to say that.
I think he has figured out that that's getting played out. So he did not.
He is self-aware enough to figure that out, huh? All right.
I wouldn't say that. I'd say that kind of like how eventually a neural net will get enough feedback over thousands of iterations. That's not because it's self-aware, hopefully. What is it? Generated adversarial networks, that kind of machine learning. That's just because over millions of simulations, it is determined that the most the most successful outcome after iteration is to stop saying you like that at this point. So it's more like that. It's not that he's self-aware. It's that it has been drilled into him after millions of interactions of saying you like that.
Or his wife just told him to slow down on that.
Yeah, it's possible too. There are people in his life. That's true.
Yeah. Kevin Jellerson asks, I was almost relieved that Green Bay scored on that one play strike to tie the game, because it certainly felt like they were going to drive down the field, knead up the clock to force overtime or a 2-point conversion. Did you guys feel the same way?
Yeah, after in the press box, after our like jaws got off the floor, we were like, that's probably good. I think the first person to say it out loud, I think we were all thinking it, but the first person to say it out loud near me was Will Ragetz. So on the left of me is John Krasinski. When he does decide to go to Vikings games, sometimes he's like breaking some insane Timberwolves news, so he can't be at the game. And half the time he has to like leave or something because he's on like a phone call doing journalism or whatever you call it. And on the right of me is Chad Graff, and then I think right next to Chad is Will. And so Will turns to Chad and me, and he's like, that might be a good thing, right? And we're like, oh yeah, 100%. 100% that's a good thing. Left Kirk Cousins too much time on the clock. As we often understand it to be the case. It was probably a good thing, because I think that, I mean, it's not true that they had a 100% chance to score, but it felt like it. They just scored at the previous 3 drives. You know, it felt like that was in the cards. It felt like there was just, you know, as a Vikings fan, you get a sense of inevitability, and sometimes it doesn't bear out, right? Because the Vikings have, at this point, I believe, won more close games or have tied in close game win percentage. But it certainly feels like an inevitability when you get into a close game scenario that the Vikings are just not going to close it out, especially against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. So it really felt like that touchdown was inevitable. I still haven't asked Mike Zimmer if they intentionally. I sent out a tweet that the Vikings intentionally let them score. I still haven't asked Mike Zimmer, you know, if he intentionally let them score. It certainly didn't look like the players were, but it could be the case that he called a play where he was like, either it's going to be a negative or a touchdown, and I know how to work with either. But the last thing I can allow is a drain the clock drive to end the game. And so we're just going to be aggressive because it's high risk, high reward. And the risk is blunted by the fact that we get the ball next. And it's a tie game, not a losing game. And so if we get the ball next and we just don't turn the ball over, which, you know, that did happen on the next play. But
or nearly
it didn't
did
count.
anyway, yes.
Yeah. But so we don't turn the ball over. That's overtime. We've got a chance in overtime. So from a play calling perspective, Zimmer might have taken that into account. And it would not shock me if he did, even though he is not necessarily a great game manager. And he tends to think in very linear terms. At least he expresses things in linear terms when he talks to us about it, that, you know, we just don't want them to score, so we're calling a defense that prevents them from scoring. It's not about letting them score. We have asked in previous games in very tight situations near the goal line if they've considered letting them score. And he has said that I've considered it, but he's never done it. So it's not as if, you know, this never enters his equation and he's such an old school football guy that he would refuse to let them score. But it could be the case that he called a play that they either score or they lose big yardage on, right? And drain the clock because it's a sack. Or I guess take a timeout because they had timeouts left. But yeah, like it might be the way they called the play took that into account. But certainly in the press box, we all were like, that's the best possible outcome for the Vikings because the Packers are going to score. It just kind of depended on when.
Ethan asks, Arif, can you please use your so-called debate skills
to
explain why Kirk is a serious MVP candidate?
I'll have you know that I was on a top 20 debate team in college in a field of hundreds. So-called debate. We didn't close very much like the Vikings in that way. We didn't close very well, but we were well regarded. I will say that. No, I mean, okay, so if we wanted to make a case for Kirk Cousins, you know, you'd have to start by kind of establishing some baseline understandings of football. So what's the most important thing? The most important thing is possession, right? It is better to have the ball than not have the ball. You only have an opportunity to score. You can only end your drives in a score if you have the ball and if you don't have the ball. And which team has the lowest percentage of turnovers on their offensive drives? That's the Vikings. Who has the lowest interception rate in the NFL? That's the Vikings. Why? Kirk Cousins is throwing the ball in a way where opponents can't seem to catch it. They can't seem to turn it into a pick. And if Cousins has figured out how to make sure that the Vikings maintain possession, have control of the clock, grind out the clock, win time of possession because they've been able to avoid these turnovers, if there's no better player in the NFL at that, then there's no better player in the NFL. Obviously, he's the MVP. Also, have you seen the MVP candidates this year? They're all bad.
They're all over the place. Aaron Rodgers still might end up getting it despite being public enemy number one for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. No, for sure. And as soon as we seriously considered Matt Stafford an MVP candidate, he throws pick sixes in back-to-back games.
Implodes. It's remarkable. Josh Allen not playing like he was. There's nobody on the Titans anymore that can play. Right. I'm confident Kyler Murray has missed too many games now to be seriously considered. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and he's Kyler Murray's touchdown interception ratio is not MVP stuff. He's got good yards per attempt. Obviously, he's great on the ground. He's got great big plays. His touchdown interception ratio is not MVP quality.
No, and if Brady rails off a couple of big wins here, and all he does is just not throw interceptions, it ends up being a situation where the voters look and go, well, I don't want to give it to Brady again, but who else do you give it to?
Kirk Cousins has thrown 2 interceptions all year. Brady has thrown 7. Just saying.
There is your so-called debate skills. Ngannou Watch asks, who in our secondary is good and who is bad? I can't tell anymore.
Patrick Peterson's good. That's the weird thing. That's it. In terms of certainties, I wouldn't say that's it. I think there's always going to be a number of players in the secondary who are good. Who that happens to be seems to change week to week. I would argue on the whole, Xavier Woods has been good. What a rough game for him to have. That was just that cratered his value, I think, for Vikings fans for a little bit. But he's been good, and I would say that going forward, he's probably going to be good. He's only had, I think, one other game where he felt a little bit worried about him. And that was I think it was a tackling thing, maybe in the run game sort of stuff. But it didn't feel like it was this coverage stuff where he was just out of position and didn't have, the speed and stuff to catch up. So Xavier Woods, I think, is good. We're just asking this question in a game where he was bad. Harrison Smith clearly is not who he was 2017, 2018, 2019, but I think he's playing well. I think he's not a top 5 safety or anything like that. Which so I guess, per our guest, Jimmy Ward is better than him. But he's valuable. He's certainly much better than an above average safety. So, Harrison Smith is good, right? Bashaud Breeland is weird because, and this is exactly how his career is, where he's got these phenomenal games and these clunker games. And then also sometimes from game to game, he's been very high variance in his career. Well, with the Vikings, he's been pretty high variance. I think, we remember the bad games more than good games just because that's how the cornerback position works. That's just kind of what we do. But he's had some good games, and we just typically don't acknowledge those good games because they come in the background of him having 3 straight bad games to start the season. But he had a pretty decent, he gave up 40 yards, but he didn't give up a single catch over 20. He had a pass breakup against Devontae Adams. That was a really good pass breakup. I don't think he committed a pass interference in this game, right? So he only gave up 2 first downs. That's pretty good. So yeah, one of them was to a blocking tight end. It was just very weird what happened there. So yeah, he was good in this game. So I think he's very volatile, trending towards bad. So there's that. Mackenzie Alexander is fine. He's just fine. He had a bad game here. I think primarily because of an Economia St. Brown reception. But he's fine. He's been fine for most of the season, so he's, whatever. But Patrick Peterson is good. I would argue that Xavier Woods is good. After that, you've got Harrison Smith. And then the Vikings are going to continue to try to put Cameron Bynum on the field. Like they started in a 3 safety set. It turned out to be a Devontae Adams like 17-yard reception or something like that. So that wasn't great. But after that, I think that the plays where they did have 3 receiver sets turned out to be fairly successful, and Bynum has been playing well. So I think we're going to see him again. So he could be considered good.
All right, next question is going to be from Chris, who asks, did the Optimism shotgun get put back in the case at the end of the game, or is it currently sitting on the table?
That's poor Optimism safety.
That is poor Optimism safety. No, I tweeted it out too. Is like the after the game, the gun is successfully back in the case, ready for the 49ers game.
Yeah,
and potentially for
for the playoffs.
For the playoffs, yeah. That whole don't make me get the shotgun out if you're talking about playoffs right now. We're a 500 team.
No. This is pessimism. They make the playoffs and hurt you.
Oh, there we go. Yes.
Yeah. So I want to be clear.
Yeah, the Optimism shotgun has been put away until next Sunday afternoon. Lundar asks, most likely to have a better pass protection for the rest of 2021. A, the Vikings. B, the Packers starting 3 guys they pick up from a flag football team in Menasha.
Well, the way some Packers fans have been explaining it, that's who they currently have, right?
Because this is the worst, most banged up team they've ever had.
Yeah, no, the Packers famously get hurt all the time. But yeah, no, this team doesn't count. It's super hurt. They have to play backups like All-Pro Elton Jenkins. Just brutal, right? That they're reduced to having the best season that Billy Turner has ever produced. Just awful that they're in a position where they get really high level center play from Lucas Patrick, who has the ability to induce offsides apparently. Just an awful situation for them.
It's too bad that they keep having to start all these guys who normally have to work their shifts over a quick trip.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I mean, I'm surprised they even find a bunch of 6'5", 330-pound guys. But that's just what they do. They're just well coached, starting a bunch of practice squad guys. No, and so obviously Elton Jenkins, he got hurt in the game, and he was replacing, in a manner of speaking, David Bakhtiari, who's already hurt. And Elton Jenkins had to switch positions from guard, where he's been phenomenal, to tackle, where he's been extremely good. And then he gets hurt, and it sounds like it's an ACL. He's out for the rest of the season, which sucks. And so the Packers might be forced to play Yasua Neiman, who replaced him in the game for the rest of the season. They did sign Dennis Kelly over the offseason. We talked about this with Justice. Seems like he's a right tackle only guy. So we'll see if they kind of move things around and maybe have Dennis Kelly play right tackle, and they might move Billy Turner over to left tackle. I don't know. He's playing well, so maybe they don't want to mess with that. But I think that for the rest of the season, the Packers are going to end up with better pass protection. The Vikings pass protection in this game against a practice squad pass rush too, right? Like they obviously haven't had Darius Smith all year. They didn't have Rashawn Gary in this game. And I guess those are the only 2 good players on the defensive front, according to some of my mentions. Preston Smith has been disappointing this year, so you could say that too. But, against a depleted pass rush, the Vikings gave up a 40% pressure rate and an even worse pass rush loss rate. So, or pass blocking loss rate. So, that's a decent indication that the Vikings offensive line just has these problems. I mean, Christian Darrisaw had his worst game so far, and against Preston Smith. And we did not see a very good game from Oliudo again. Brian O'Neill, I thought, was not playing super well, and then I rewatched it a little bit, and I kind of agree with the PFF grade. I thought he did actually play pretty well. Not elite, like his paycheck seems to get close to, but very well. Mason Cole played awful, and then he's probably going to get replaced next week with Garrett Bradbury, who plays awfully poorly. And Ezra Cleveland was fine. Did some bad moments, but he's fine. But that's against an apparently bad Packers pass rush. So against a Vikings pass rush that is, according to Packers fans, completely healthy, and you've got everybody you want there for sure, 100%. Can't think of a single player or even 2 players that you want.
Possibly one of the best players in the NFC North.
Yeah, they have everybody they wanted. They had premier pass rusher Dalvin Tomlinson. They had up and coming stud Everson Griffin. and they had a versatile Michael Bennett type guy who could play defensive tackle, defensive end, and Sheldon Richardson. So everybody that you want.
I thought for a second you were going to call him a Sheldon Richardson type guy, like Sheldon Richardson.
That actually would have been good. But yeah, and also DJ Wanham, you can play defensive tackle, defensive end too. So they had two of those guys, right? Perhaps the Cliff Averill to Sheldon Richardson's Michael Bennett.
Exactly.
If you can like follow the analogy.
Yeah, it's
perhaps the Sheldon Richardson to Sheldon Richardson's Michael Bennett.
There you go.
Yeah, so against that premier pass rushing unit, the Packers offensive line did a really phenomenal job of preventing Rodgers from getting too much pressure. So I would say that the Packers, on their admittedly actually beleaguered offensive line, is going to end up with a better pass protection for the rest of the year statistic or performance than the Vikings, fully healthy, starting next week with Garrett Bradbury coming back, fully healthy offensive line.
Man, that Week 17 matchup looks interesting.
For sure.
That's a Sunday night, January 2nd. Boy, that looks interesting.
Yeah, I'm flying actually directly from Vermont into Minneapolis and then immediately driving to Green Bay. Like, I don't get to spend any time at home. I'm immediately driving to Green Bay from Christmas in Vermont.
Let's go to Jack Rackham, who asks, does Zimmer's comment to Kirk, paraphrasing here, you try to score touchdowns, I'll tell you when to throttle back, reveal anything about the source of the conservatism seen in the first half of the season?
Yes and no. It does reveal the source of conservatism for the beginning, middle part of the season, right? I think the first 4 weeks, that was a Kubiak thing. I think after that, it was a Kirk Cousins thing. And I say that because, and those first 4 weeks were really good, right? When we talked about Kirk Cousins on a potential MVP track, he was like an NFC Player of the Month sort of candidate. He might have won it, actually. I don't remember. But he was good, right? Certainly statistically. And he got rid of the ball faster than he ever has. He had a really low depth of target, and the Vikings offense was built off of things like slants and stuff like that. That's offensive design. That's Clint Kubiak. After that, the Vikings started calling more deep shots. Kirk Cousins is holding on to the ball longer because the routes are taking longer to develop. They're calling play action a little bit more, not as much as last year, but a little bit more. That is Clint Kubiak trying to create explosive plays, and Cousins kind of declining them. And I've got a couple of pieces out, at least two, I want to say, that delve into this in a little bit more detail looking at the film. And that's, I think, when Kirk was being too conservative for Zimmer. I think in the first 4 weeks, that's part of the game plan. That's what you were doing. But I think for most of the season, that is the source of conservatism is largely Kirk, because Zimmer's mentioned multiple times, said 2 weeks ago, right? Shouldn't be throwing the ball 5 yards in second and 18, paraphrase. Cousins has deep routes available to him and he's not throwing them. So I think that the source of conservatism is largely Cousins for the middle chunk of the season.
Next question is from Michael Lacoste, who asks, is the curse broken? This game felt willed by the football gods to where nearly all 50-50 calls went the Vikings' way. Their 500th franchise history win regular season to put them at 500 with a fourth quarter comeback and a game-winning field goal against a division rival. No, Michael, no.
If you were particularly cruel football god, how would you torture Vikings fans? You would not have them check out partway through the season. You absolutely wouldn't do that. You would do what has happened to Vikings fans since time immemorial, by which I mean like 1961, which is to make the fan base buy in every time, pull them back in, and then kill them. They're the gut punch team. There's no team that pulls you in more, I think, than the Vikings, because the problem from a football god standpoint is the Vikings fans know. Vikings fans know that this is what the team does. And if you know and you're guarded against it, the team has to do more and more every single time to get you to buy in. And what better way to buy in than the 500th franchise history regular season win against a division rival, the game-winning field goal, a fourth quarter comeback. You put them back at 500. You're back in the playoff. You got over a 50% chance, according to every statistical marker out there, to make the playoffs in like this moment for the Vikings fans. Like if Kirk Cousins had a moment and this was a primetime game as opposed to a noon game, you would call it, this was the moment, his drive here, right? And maybe with the pick, maybe not, but you know what I mean, right? Like he engineered a fourth quarter game-winning drive. That's the way to buy them in, right? Like how did you get the fans bought in 2019 after just a gut-wrenching season? Like rumors that Mike Zimmer is going to get fired right before a playoff game, in overtime drive by Kirk Cousins in prime time in the Kingdome or whatever they call it nowadays, the Mercedes-Benz Superdome. I don't know, the concrete dome.
Didn't they just sell that to? I think they just sold the rights to that to a casino too. So
in the MGM Grand Bowl, Boveda.com.lv. I don't know, man.
Close enough.
Yeah,
I don't know. I've heard a lot of people online talking about how they've now bought into the Vikings. So
you fools! That's exactly what the football gods want. The curse isn't broken. You just heard evidence from James that the curse is alive and well, and it has roped you in. Incredible. The fact that you've asked that is proof that the curse isn't broken.
If anything, you double down on the curse. You double down on the curse.
Double down on the curse. Not until we have a second episode titled "The Vikings Win the Super Bowl Is the Curse Broken?"
And we've said that since episode 3. So
yeah, this is a long-standing stance of the podcast. Long-time listeners know.
Long-time listeners are aware that friends of the pod have even said that's a thing. Andrew asks, do you think Zimmer dialed up that final Green Bay drive, the one play, to be extremely blitz heavy to either A, allow them to score quick or get them to go for and out? Both these options give the Vikings the best chance of winning, but anything in between, like a 2-minute drive to score, would favor the Pack. Basically, we answered this already, but here are the 3 questions that are worth mentioning. Am I giving Zimmer too much credit? Does win probability actually work this way? I feel like 4D chess, like this should be played more in the league. Am I overthinking it?
In reverse order, absolutely 4D chess should be played like this in the league. That would rule. Yes, you're overthinking it, but that's what's fun about it. I would love it. Does win probability actually work this way? Yes. Like the Vikings had a positive win probability at the end of that drive. Like, doesn't that feel weird? But that's because of how important possession is. Remember, Kirk Cousins, MVP. Possession is important. Can't turn the ball over. Having the ball in a tie game is winning. So the Vikings had a positive win probability. Had the Packers ground out the clock, it always feels like grinding out the clock. The past tense shouldn't be ground, it should be grinded, but whatever. Had the Packers ground out the clock and made it so that you've got 1 second on the clock as they decide between a 2-point conversion or an extra point, the Vikings would have about 50-50 win probability, maybe less because the Packers were favored in the game. Are you giving Zimmer too much credit? I don't think so. I think that the blitz-heavy option here is part of the calculus. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit, but I think that is worth considering.
Next question is going to be from Jeremy McGee, who asks, can you or any other Norse code reader recommend something to listener, yes, recommend something
Sure.
to help me de-stress from the weekly roller coaster that is Vikings fandom? Looking at the win probability versus time plot of each game makes me hate myself and this stupid team.
No, because I live in this muck. I'm rewatching games. I've got all 22. I'm going through databases and I'm learning how to program in a language that isn't an actual programming language to learn more stats. I am stuck. I don't know how to de-stress from the Vikings. That's all I am right now. I am composed of Viking stress because it's my job and also my hobby. I should look into that. So no, but you know what show is really good that hasn't aged poorly? I think maybe I'm wrong. Leverage. They just there's a new thing. I haven't watched the new one yet, but there's a new one I think on Amazon called. Actually, I don't know, but it's Leverage. You just search Leverage in Amazon show. It originally aired in 2008. It's very obvious because they have flip phones and stuff like that. And the hacking technology is very funny and no one really talks about AI in a way that really matches how AI has evolved in the technical, whatever, right? But I try to tell Chelsea that it's a well-written show with bad dialogue. Just like hard to like get across, but like the characters are both two-dimensional and full. Like they play, it's a heist show, by the way. Every episode is a different heist. And they play these characters that are so comically within the role that they fit in a heist. But then within that kind of bubble, they have all kinds of like, and there's like a suspension of disbelief. Like one of the characters is not only a really great hitman, but he is like a professional level, maybe even Michelin level chef. He's a really good country singer, which in fairness, the actor is a really good country singer. Like one of the only modern country songs I liked is they actually performed one of his songs in the show. And I was like, gee, this is actually really good. But like, there's a suspension of disbelief. They're some of the best in the world at what they do, but they've got all of these character arcs and growth, and they go into these backstories in really believable ways. And it's potato chip consumption at the same time. It is crazy how interesting the show is. It's not like HBO primetime quality, whatever, but I would recommend that to de-stress from Vikings fandom, even though it's a heist show, even though the show is built around stress. It's formulaic enough that, they'll figure it out at the end.
Eventually. If if it was not a misprint, if you were looking for like reading, if you were looking for book recommendations. See, my problem is I end up reading a bunch of autobiographies. So that ends up turning into like the last couple of books I read were like John Cleese's autobiography, which is fantastic. And there was one other, I just, for whatever reason, decided to pick up Anthony Bourdain's Kitchen Confidential. Which,
that's a fun read.
That was fun. I hadn't actually sat down and read the whole thing before, so that was great. If you want to de-stress, why not just go to The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Or I just picked up I picked up yesterday and started reading the Shea Serrano's hip hop book. Oh
yeah, that's good.
That
Shea
just
Serrano's like a really good writer. I don't like super love his Twitter, but it's got a lot of positive energy, so I can't hate it. But he's a good writer, that's for sure.
I just started his podcast, No Skips. There were two episodes in particular where they just go for like 2 hours on a particular hip hop album, and the two I listened to were Kanye West's "My Beautiful Twisted Fantasy," and which great album, but like it really went in depth on it. But the other one that happened was Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style. And they spent 2 hours just in this love letter to this. It was really fun to sit and listen to. And they like even go into like, what's the hardest verse? Like, what's the best guest spot? Is there a song on here that you could remove and it wouldn't decrease the album? Or like, let's go in depth on some of the songs in particular. Like, it's a really fun show. So maybe check one of those options out. Brian Jellerson is about to commit a sin here. As much as we all love the offensive Swiss Army knife that is CJ Ham.
Captain Ham.
Captain Ham, Brian. This is another reason why your brother is cooler than you are right now. When do you think they are going to involve Kane more? Example, 3rd and 1 sweep, where his speed is likely more useful than a fullback's. Ham, forgive me.
He actually wrote Ham, forgive me in it?
Yes.
Well, that gets you partway to absolution, but not enough. The issue seems to be that the Vikings have bought into the CJ Ham memes in a way that's impacting their play calling. Now, I don't think that that's actually true, but it is very funny to think of them like reading the Vikings subreddit and being like, "Yeah, we should give CJ Ham the ball more." He's pretty fast for a fullback. He won the he mossed somebody on a fade. He's a fullback. Who does that? We'll give him the ball on a toss. Seems like they've bought into some of the stuff that Ham does better than other fullbacks, but doesn't mean he does well compared to the menu of options you have available to you. Yeah. With say Dalvin Cook.
Yeah, at this point it's more of a meme situation, and I am pushing this to death. I will admit,
so the Vikings.
Yeah, I will admit that the moment before they gave the toss to Ham, I even said aloud, "All right, time to get Ham involved." And then it went poorly, and I went, "Well, that felt like that was my fault."
That's not what I meant.
Yeah. Maybe if you use the Ham correctly.
Yeah, this is a very letter of the law versus spirit of the law kind of situation. Like, yeah, I did technically say give the ball to CJ Ham. That's not, I didn't mean that.
Yes,
We
exactly.
both know the conversation we were having. Yeah, no, it would be cool if they involved Kenny more. I thought we were actually going to see a little bit of Kenny Wangu involvement, especially since he was so cruelly denied the week prior on the fake field goal, or the fake punt. So yeah, I think it's time to get Kenny involved more. On the plays that they were going to give Ham, where it would make Captain Ham look worse than he is, they should instead involve Kenny and then keep Ham doing what he does best.
Agreed. Also, from Brian Jellerson, for a Reefs Seahawks superfan and forever 12th man Twitter corner, you doing okay, man?
Are the Seahawks I guess Russell Wilson's in and they're not doing
down.
Well.
People are calling
I'm beginning to think that he actually did not speed through rehab in the way that he was implying. I don't think the 19 hours a day was doing what he thought it did.
People are calling for Pete Carroll's head. They are very aware.
So first of all, Pete Carroll might be past his prime, right? So it would make sense. But I just have to say, the quarterback is clearly lying about the status of his finger, and he's forcing his way onto the field when it's inappropriate. It's just like Baker Mayfield.
Yeah, this is not good play from just about anybody. And I mean, you're aware of this better than most. This whole, if you look at the trades that have been made, if you look at the transactions that have been done for the Seahawks over the last 5 years, for the most part, they've all been atrocious. Like, nothing has actually really worked for them. So the fact that all of this is just coming back to bite them now, and this is not a team that's going to end up making the playoffs. They don't look good in any part of the game. They're just slightly more competent than the Jets.
That's what a brutal state. The fact that the Seahawks are imploding is very funny to me. The only issue I have with it is I am being told that Seahawks Twitter is thinking of branching into being other Twitters, and one of the candidates is Vikings Twitter. And I don't know if that'll change my experience because I see it all the time anyway. They just interact with me. I would say against my will, but I haven't blocked them. But certainly I'm not attempting to encourage it. So I don't know if the interaction with me will increase, but I don't know if the rest of Vikings Twitter is ready for just the sheer. Vikings Twitter is its own kind of weird, but Seahawks Twitter is bizarre.
I'm ready to get weird with it. I feel like these are my last couple of years. I'm gonna get weird with it, like Frank from It's Always Sunny. It's time. Let's just accept it. Speaking of getting weird, Luke Braun asks, in an alternate timeline where the Vikings oust Rick Spielman, keep George Patton, and everything else stays put, what changes about the Vikings and or the Broncos?
I don't know if the Vikings would have been different. Maybe they'd be more aggressive about moving up and trading with the Broncos, with George Payton in there. But obviously the Broncos didn't like Justin Fields, or they would have drafted him, right? It's not like the Vikings would have gone up to get him. So I don't know if anything changes on the Vikings end. I think on the Broncos end, they probably draft a quarterback, right? Which, I love Teddy, but sounds like that might have been the move, right? And here's the thing. Surtain is good. He's a good corner, like his dad, I guess. But he's a good corner. It was absent needing a quarterback, that's a good pick so far. But man, maybe with a different maybe both teams are worse for this having happened. That's on the table, right? The Vikings are worse because they didn't fire Spielman and promote Payton, and the Broncos are worse because they hired Payton, right? And the Broncos have made some moves for former Vikings, including, Teddy and Michael Boone, and I think a couple of others. And I don't think any of those have worked out. So maybe both teams would have been better off if this had never happened. But I don't know that the Vikings changed too much, right? Because the philosophy in Denver does not seem to be all, and they have a defensive head coach, so you can kind of track it, does not seem to be all that different than the philosophy in Minnesota.
Well, let's go to the next question, which is from like a sexy orange, and I double checked that. That's his username. How does Justin Jefferson's early career compare to Randy Moss, given their respective eras?
So I was looking into this a little bit. So John Krasinski of The Athletic had published a really good piece, kind of comparing the two, not like statistically. It's a really good piece that kind of goes through what Moss has said when mic'd up and how he's reacted to situations and how that kind of compares to the way Justin Jefferson carries himself. It's a really good piece. I would recommend reading it. But statistically, if you wanted to look at that, this one's kind of interesting. So if you kind of compare the two, and I ran through the stat head like player comparison thing. So obviously over 2 seasons, Randy Moss has played more games because the 2021 season isn't done yet. And obviously Moss started right away and Justin Jefferson didn't. But if you compare their careers, right, on a total yardage perspective, Moss has about 350 more yards than Jefferson. And I think Jefferson can get, 350 more yards in the rest of the games that'll occur. But the thing that stands out is that Moss is more of a big play guy. The yards per reception is 18, while Justin Jefferson is just above average in yards per reception. And this is not a quality indicator. This is a usage indicator at 15.5. So his usage is a little bit deeper downfield, but he also catches more passes. So his receptions per game is 1 higher than Randy Moss's receptions per game. So Justin Jefferson is nearly 6. He's got 5.8 receptions per game. Randy Moss is 4.7. The thing that is and Moss has like twice as many touchdowns per game, right? And so he's a big play guy, and his big plays tend to score. Jefferson has been denied at the 1 a couple of times this year, so we might see that bounce back up due to regression. But Jefferson has more yards per game at 90.2 versus 85.2. So from a yardage perspective, he's doing better than Moss. And there's a couple of caveats to this, of course. Now, if Moss's touchdowns primarily came from like the 5 or the 1 or whatever, then you would have to say it is probable that Justin Jefferson is producing more value than Randy Moss did. But I think the touchdowns, in terms of the expected points that he's created, kind of tilt things back in his favor in terms of expected points. Now, obviously, Justin Jefferson gets a lot of credit for getting the ball to the 1, because if you get the ball from the 25 to the 1, from your own 25 to the opponent's 1, that turns it from 1.0 expected points to 6.8 expected points. That's 5.8 expected points. That's virtually, you're just missing out on 0.2 expected points. That's virtually a touchdown, right, in terms of your impact on the game. So it's not nothing what he's done, but I think that probably Randy Moss has more expected points per game. Now, if you take a look at the yardage totals, I think your first instinct, and I think it's a correct instinct, is to say, well, they played in different eras. Jefferson is playing, 20 years after Randy Moss. So you would expect him in a more wide open league with more passing and more efficient quarterbacks. So there's more passing attempts per game, and quarterbacks are more efficient, right? You would expect him to get more. And I think a good example is to, compare Dante Culpepper to Kirk Cousins, right? So Dante Culpepper in 2000, I guess, it wasn't Dante Culpepper throwing to Moss in those games, but if we're looking at like a really high performing player, right? Like he's incredible. He's got a bunch of yards per attempt. He's great, right? In 2000, he had 8.2 yards per attempt, and I believe that was second in the league, or 8.3 yards per attempt. I believe that was second in the league to like Peyton Manning, right? That's incredible, right? Kirk Cousins, his yards per attempt is actually down this year compared to last year. Last year, he had 8.3 yards per attempt. So that's the same, and he certainly was not leading the league in yards per attempt. So you could say, hey, quarterback's more efficient. Also, they're throwing the ball more this year, right? Culpepper's most attempts that he's ever had is 549. Now we get quarterbacks with like 600 attempts. The league is throwing the ball more, and quarterbacks are getting more yards per throw. So you would think, hey, maybe if you adjust for all of that, Randy Moss ends up with more receiving yardage in an era-adjusted sense. And my initial look at it is that you don't adjust receivers for era between 1998 and 2000. You might, going back to 1960, 1970, 1980, but you wouldn't for 1998 all the way up to 2021. And the reason for that is, and we've discussed this on our previous podcast, is because what is driving quarterback efficiency from the perspective of skill usage players elsewhere is that you're getting more receivers on the field. So you have more 3 receiver sets, and so they're consuming more of that yardage. And also, other positions are better at catching the ball. So tight ends are much more likely to go 600, 700, even 1,000 yards in a season. And running backs are much more likely to be able to catch the ball. So all of that receiving kind of gets filtered through these other positions. So quarterbacks are more efficient and they're throwing the ball more, but they happen to be throwing the ball to different players. And so I ran a quick and dirty, and this is not how you should do it, but it's a good kind of like sanity check on yards per route run over the PFF era, just 2008 to 2021. And it has very slightly gone up for receivers at the top. Very slightly, not enough, I think, to adjust. And that's only 2008 to 2021. But then you take a look at total receiving yardage and you compare it over the course of the years, going all the way back to 1998. And the number of receivers who have finished in that span, so top 100 seasons, with the most total receiving yardage, the most you have is in 2018 with 9 of them. And you think, oh, well, okay, maybe that means there are more receivers with high volumes. No, the next most is 2013, tied with the year 2000. It's random. The correlation among the top 100 receivers in total receiving yards versus the year that they played in is 0.03. And again, this is not how you do it. It's a very dirty data set. It's not great. But the number 1 is Calvin Johnson at 2012, right? Nearly 2,000 receiving yards. After that, it's 2015 with both Julio and Antonio. After that, it's 2019. So that's now, right? But in the top 5, and 5th is Marvin Harrison in 2002. So in the top 5, you've got a span between 2002 and 2019. In terms of receiving total, there is not a reason to adjust high-level starting receivers that are top 2 options on their team for era. So from that perspective, it is, in fact, almost as impressive what Justin Jefferson is doing versus what Randy Moss is doing. And, of course, Moss is more valuable because of his touchdown capability and his big play capability. It's just, I mean, Justin Jefferson's a really good big play receiver, but Randy Moss is Randy Moss, right? So in terms of big play capability, and Justin Jefferson makes up for some of it in terms of, his move the chains capability and stuff like that. But they are really close, which is mind-boggling.
Alex asks, will this be the episode that contains the title, Vikings win the Super Bowl, and was this the plan all along? No.
Well, it wasn't the plan.
No comment from the person who names the episodes. Bishop Sycamore alumnus asks, what is the official Norse code position on the NFL's emphasis on taunting penalties? Due to podcast brand, I regret to inform you that 48-yard extra points... 48-yard extra points, you need to be pro taunting penalties.
Disagree. You can create 48-yard extra points in a variety of ways, including penalties that occur because of celebration and things that would be called unsportsmanlike conduct that you would not call for celebration, which is no longer a penalty, or taunting, which we remove in this universe, right? Our official stance, which I am dictating right now to you, James, is that taunting penalties are bad and that we shouldn't have them. And we can still have 48-yard extra points because on a celebration, you can still have a delay of game penalty, and that'll move you back. You can also have all kinds of other penalties that occur after the snap, like unnecessary roughness, different kinds of unsportsmanlike conduct. Throwing the ball in the stands is a penalty. Hanging off the field goal is a penalty. There are all kinds of penalties that can encourage 48-yard extra points. And those we might be in favor of. Especially hanging off the field goal. That one is like players probably shouldn't do it because it can change the field goal and it's very expensive to fix, especially mid-game. The Falcons had to do it once, I think because of Jimmy Graham.
Yep, and it tilted. It was great.
It was tilted. And that sucks, and it delays the game, and it costs the NFL money, and you shouldn't encourage it. But also, on the other side, it ruled, and I don't know if I'm against that. So that can create 48-yard extra points. So we're for that, but we're not for taunting penalties. Players should be able to taunt.
Yes. Anton asks, who is each NFC team's Taysom Hill, and what money laundering deal should they get, assuming that someone will learn Peyton's dark arts and maneuver the cap to actually get a net positive out of it? I mean, if you're looking at the cap space, you probably need to look at their amazingly named GM and likely scumbag Mickey Loomis.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on under the water with Mickey Loomis that is under federal investigation, I think. So I'm not going to talk about it too much. But in football related terms, also dark arts. No, I mean, but like, I'm not going to go through the entire NFC, but in the NFC North, you've got obviously Jordan Love. There's no question about that. He's clearly the Green Bay Packers, Taysom Hill. For the Vikings, who's going to consume $10 million a year for like no reason? It used to be Kyle Rudolph, right?
It used to be. You could make the argument for Rudolph before. Dakota Dozier was signed for a while for what seemed like no good reason, despite his play.
So I think that one thing is that with Taysom Hill, you kind of never have a plan for him. And so I don't think you can pick Kyle Rudolph or let's say Harrison Smith, continues to decline in play and continues to consume a lot of money. You'd think instinctively you'd say him, but I think it's got to be someone who from the moment go, you're like, I don't know, man. And the person who has the most potential for it, who isn't it right now, but who has the most potential for it, I think is Dan Chisna, right? Because he's never going to be a receiver, right? And so if the Vikings continue to sign or continue to roster him, they don't really need to continue to sign him because he's on a rookie contract as an undrafted free agent. But if they sign him again because of his ability as a punt gunner, you're going to start to have some questions until he turns in like Matt Slater-like performances. So he's got that potential.
What about the tight end that the Vikings signed or that the Vikings traded for?
Christopher Herndon? Yeah, Herndon could be it, especially if they sign him. I don't think they will, but if they sign him, he immediately becomes that guy. So we've got a couple of potential players that could occupy that role for the Vikings, but I don't know if they have any right now. Dakota Dozier might be the closest because it never made sense to have him, to sign him in the first place and then continue to resign him. I don't know that the Lions have anybody that stands out, but I think the most likely is probably Godwin Igwebuike, who is both a safety and a running back. And that screams, this guy seems talented, but I have no idea what to do with him. And that's very Taysom Hill. So I think it's him. And I think that's how you round out the NFC North.
Who did we have for the Bears again?
Oh, no, we didn't. Andy Dalton.
I was going to say Nick Foles.
Oh, no, you're right. Andy Dalton at least plays.
Yes, Nick Foles is just sitting there collecting these checks. Nick Foles just costs
money. Yeah, he only costs money. That's all he does.
That is.
I envy that.
There's a really odd amount of job security that he manages to have here. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's fitting that he follows Chase Daniel, right? Because he's like Chase Daniel, right? Like his contract is like $8 million a year. That is Taysom Hill money. Wow.
Yeah, he's just missing all the void years that he had in the last contract.
Yeah, and all he had to do was win a Super Bowl. Man, that's the life.
He's basically put out to stud. Ted Glover asks, will you be in LA for the Viking Super Bowl and be on Radio Row, or will you be staying home and broadcasting remotely?
We will absolutely be in LA for a Viking Super Bowl. Are you kidding me? First of all, The Athletic is absolutely paying me to go there. Second, you're all going to pay. If the Vikings go to the Super Bowl, no question, all of you are going to pay for us to go there. James is getting his flight paid by you guys. And thank you.
And thank you, Patreon. That ends up being a thing. Won't involve buying a ticket, but I'll definitely be in LA for it because the Patreon's doing well. It's just not doing buy a Super Bowl ticket well.
Oh yeah, there's no chance.
I've got a cousin
plane ticket, but there won't be a Super Bowl ticket.
I've got a cousin with a dealership down the valley. I'll crash there. We'll be fine. But I can't even imagine. Ricardo has a question I had to do research for. Ricardo asks, with the reveal in the most recent episode that James has an ex with a martial arts background, I got to thinking, what kind of super team or POG squad could be assembled from his pool of exes? We have a mortician, a foot fetish expert, a lighting enthusiast, and now a martial artist. How many more are there out there? Does Arif have a spreadsheet to track them? Could Draw Play Dave be commissioned to produce a comic centering on James as a Bill-like figure at the head of an international hit squad? Perhaps
I absolutely will not have a spreadsheet at all.
Perhaps the operatives could have barbecue-related code names. Who gets to be called Burnt Ends?
Well, James.
Wow. So there's a lot going on there. And yeah, there's an awful lot going on there. Boy, I don't know who gets to be called Burnt Ends or like, Applewood or something like that, but I mean, if I'm going through, I went and I made a list, which always is a terrible idea. Never do this. Never make a list of your exes, because as if I'm not like depressed enough. It's like, okay, well, let me just go through here and figure out if I was responsible for this one, or if I was responsible for this breakup or not. But going through the list, I was kind of struck by the lack of like real killers that could have been in. There was the artist / National Guard member. She could have been useful in this. She did try to hit me with her car once, but I mean, if you ignore that, I wouldn't.
Hold on, was she successful?
No, you've heard that story before.
Yeah, I'm just to clarify for the podcast, that would make her potentially skilled, but not like, that's almost disqualifying that she couldn't off you, which is not a good. I don't want her to kill you. I'm just saying the fact that she couldn't is like not great for a super team.
Yep, that becomes a bit of an issue. Let's see, going down the list, there was the lawyer / paralegal. I don't know if she brings a lot of killing to the table. I dated 2 phlebotomists, which is an odd thing. Yeah, I don't understand.
I had a nickel for every time.
Exactly, I'd have 2 nickels. But I've dated 2 phlebotomists, which was odd. There was the roller derby girl. She would have been, she would have been good for this.
Yeah, that's perfect for an assembled pool of X's for sure. Like, if not a super team, at least like a Scott Pilgrim Evil X's sort of.
Exactly. The concert pianist and the saxophone. No, that definitely not. I dated a notary public. I don't know exactly what she would be good for in this.
That's like, okay,
instance,
back to Leverage. That's like the main character of Leverage, who's the mastermind. He is an insurance fraud investigator by background. I think the notary public, like, they know how the system works, kind of. I just had a notary explain my mortgage to me, so I feel I'm very impressed by notaries at the moment. So, welcome to being 30 plus, by the way, and privileged. Welcome to being 30 plus and privileged. But yeah, that's very mastermindy. So they could kind of be behind the scenes running, the super team. So they're there, right?
Yeah.
On like, helping out the martial artist and the National Guard person and the what was it? What was I just arguing? Should actually
roller derby girl and
the roller derby girl.
I think the phlebotomist, that has to count for something, right?
It's like a medic, right? You can have like a medic on the team.
Yeah, I just don't know if I would trust the first one. Maybe the second one more, but definitely the first one.
Well, sometimes the shows, actually including Leverage, like will like flip out, one of the characters for another one that has like the exact same skill set. Remember, like Crusher and Polanski, right, on Star Trek. They switched out the doctors.
Yep.
Leverage did that with the grifters. They switched them out. A lot of shows will just switch out one character for another character. I like how identical skill set, but a different personality.
Yeah. Let's see. The English professor / author. I don't know if she would work here as well.
If that feels like that would be relevant to the story, though, right?
Maybe
not on the squad, but if you want like a breakdown of at fault versus no fault, we actually did already discuss this. It's in the Patreon. Might be only Christmas clip stuff. I don't think we have a bonus episode for this.
It's by the beginning of December we're getting our last one for the year before we start doing Christmas stuff. So yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So subscribe to the Patreon for a very Reef-like breakdown. There's no other way to put it.
Yeah, I think we've got a squad here, which isn't to say anything bad about the last ones. that doesn't really fit in this.
There's a lot going on. This is an ensemble cast. Like this is like Ocean's 11 stuff. I thought we were dealing with like maybe, and I knew enough about you to know that it wasn't just 5Xs, but more than 5Xs that could be on a super team. That's the thing where I'm just like, oh, we're in Ocean's 11 territory, not in Mod Squad A team type stuff. Like we've got
people are doing backflips in the cage.
Yeah, for sure. So this is extended. It has to be really tight writing for this to work. Quite a cast to work with.
Yeah, I just
okay. Now we're at the point where the question, does Arif have a spreadsheet to track them, has become shockingly relevant, and that makes me feel bad. But the question has forced us to talk about it, and I only know how to talk about stuff the way I know how to talk about stuff. But no, I will never spreadsheet James's relationships ever. That's an Arif promise.
Yeah, because at some point we end up having to talk about the married woman. I'm just not ready to talk about that one yet. So,
well, that sounds like Christmas episode stuff.
Well, no. We'll go to the next one, which is
Sorry, we're not going to mine every moment of your life for content.
Weird. Not even for live show. Don from Ohio asks, why do the Packers never get any calls from the refs?
It's just the Packers have been one of the league's least favorite teams. Small market team. Can't really do anything about it. Haven't had a lot of success, and just they don't really have any stories to tell, and so the league just kind of shoves them aside. And if they get kind of close to winning some games, they kind of put their hand on the scale a little bit, make sure that they don't get any national attention, because there's just nothing interesting about the team, and you kind of don't want them in the spotlight in case they embarrass the NFL.
That makes sense. Small town. Mm-hmm. Finally, Don from Ohio also asks, the Vikings will likely go in a new direction after this season. Their new GM/coach drafts an unknown fullback with the last name of Turkey. Turkey exceeds all expectations that the Vikings cut Ham. Everyone loves Turkey except Arif because he doesn't like his extra dry humor. Turkey goes on to have a stellar football career with the Vikings, which includes multiple Pro Bowl appearances and breaks multiple NFL records for fullbacks.
What records would those be? What are records available to fullbacks? No way Turkey breaks a yardage record, because the yardage. Jim Brown was a fullback. Like, there's no way.
Well, let's finish up here. My question is, would Arif and James consider Turkey to be better than Ham?
The player represented by the name Turkey would be superior to the player represented by the name Ham. Yes.
I feel like if that ended up happening, that our Christmas...
Look, I've got no problem with the country of Turkey either. This is not about the word Turkey.
Feel like our Norse code Christmas card that next year would have to be one of us in a Ham jersey and the other in the Turkey jersey, and you just take the shot from behind, and that ends up being the Christmas card.
That would be pretty good. Yeah.
See, we go and have a romantic drive out in the middle of Virginia, and I'm back talking about our Christmas cards. So we're going apple picking, damn it. Yeah, that's I can't get behind this Turkey talk. That's just not for me.
Yeah, that was gross to even hypothesize about.
Yeah, I don't like that at all. Well, congratulations. You have made it to the end of this episode of Norse Code. Hope you guys have all enjoyed it. Again, we will not be coming back later this week because this week is Thanksgiving. So we are not recording on Thursday. You will get our next episode on Monday. So, Arif, what do you have to plug?
Yes, I've got a piece about the way the Vikings won the game from an offensive standpoint, breaking down the X's and O's, coming up on The Athletic very soon. That's over at theathletic.com/author/Reef-Shazan. I might have something about the 49ers. That seems unlikely at the moment, but possible. So that might also be at The Athletic. And then obviously we've got our game previews and stuff like that. But yeah, nothing else for me to plug. I don't know if I'm on any podcast or anything like that. Follow me on Twitter at Reef-Shazan NFL.
Well, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci, so We'll see about that 49ers thing. But for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And please remember, Case Cookus. And we'll be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to